500 years ago on the celestial calendar, there was an invasion of alien beasts. Chaos began to reign in the world. These creatures burned villages to the coals, and people's blood flowed in rivers. The head of the 10 gods, the God of Devouring, couldn't watch the destruction of the world in peace. He brought the gods to the lower realm and teamed up with the spirit eaters to fight the alien beasts. For the past 3 years, the monsters have been destroyed, and the wars are over. The God of Devouring was seriously injured in a battle with an alien beast. He secluded himself in a heavenly spring, but unfortunately was subjected to a conspiracy. When the soul is attacked, it disappears and the person dies. Fortunately, Long Dinglanso had kept the last bit of God's soul. He wandered between heaven and earth, waiting for the opportunity to be reborn. Meanwhile, it was a very sad day in the small town of Bifu. On this day was the farewell to Bisa. Many people grieved for him because of respect, because he was a good man, but unfortunately, he had a weak body. But the loudest was Bi-yun, as he was a relative after all, even though he was just pretending, as they hated him with all their souls. At that, people behind his back were stonewalling him, as they assumed that Bi-yun himself beat Bisa to death. And this acting really looks really similar. Everyone thought so, because he was a loser that you don't know how to cultivate. And Bisa was part of the family after all. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared and headed straight for Bizi's coffin. It was a soul that was looking for a new body, and luckily, it found one. When the soul completely moved into BC's body, he didn't realize what had even happened or where he was. It was all strange to him, for he remembered that he had been consumed by devil energy in his past life. At that, his head was falling apart and he couldn't even think straight. And further, he slowly began to recall the events in this body's life. For example, about how the old patriarch told him that Bisa's parents were missing and he was very weak and unable to practice. So he ordered him not to cause trouble to anyone in the family. He also recalled another memory. Bitao yelled at Bisa and claimed that his father had done nothing for the family and his son was a waste, and reminded him that the B family was a famous family in the eastern continent. There were also flashbacks when all the people were baiting and bad-mouthing him, and sometimes he was often beaten for being weak. None of the people liked him, as he was just a waste of medicinal pills, and if those pills went to others, their refinement would reach the 10th level, if not more. So, of course, everyone hated him and beat him up as much as they could and whoever they could. Bisa realized that the spiritual power of this body was exactly the same as the past life. His soul could find a similar body. Therefore, the memory that he got is this memory of this body. Only then did he realize that he was in a coffin, and he immediately started screaming and getting nervous. It took him so long to realize what was happening. Even though Bi-yun shouted and cried to the entire audience, but it wasn't true. Inside himself, he was pleased that his blow was very strong, and thus was able to reduce him to the grave. Suddenly, the lid of the coffin began to move. Bi-yun didn't realize what was even going on. After that, the coffin lid flew off right into Bi-yun's face. Bisa was completely refreshed and full of energy. All the people were shocked and scared, so they started to quickly run away from him when they saw his power and how he rose up and stood up in the first place. Some people in the crowd began to think it was Bisa's ghost that appeared through resentment toward the others. But the one who was most confused was Bi-yun. Still, after a few seconds, he gathered his wits and swore that he would not let others know that he was the one who had killed him. So he got up off his knees and decided to kill him. Bi-yun started yelling for all the people to stay behind him since Bisa must be killed. He decided to take matters into his own hands and fix it himself. Bisa only laughed with Bi-yun's statement, and afterward, Bisa announced that no one would control his destiny from today, and added that he wanted him to pay a 10-fold price. Bi-yun, meanwhile, was already flying with his fist at Bisa. He dodged his punch with ease. Bi-yun was shocked at how it was even possible, although BC's body didn't possess spiritual power, but his skills of kung fu techniques were still with him. Next, he counterattacked him and pinned his face right to the floor. Suddenly, Uncle Tao began to be dissatisfied from the crowd. He didn't understand where Bisa had learned martial arts and why he was using them so harshly against Bi-yun. Bisa only laughed off his accusations as he couldn't secretly study martial arts, and it means his son is too weak. Tao didn't like the way he was spoken to and decided to teach him etiquette, and activated the wolf shadow attack technique. With his technique, he hit right in BC's chest. He was in a lot of pain from such an attack, and he even slid a bit on the ground. He lost all his spiritual power and was completely crippled. Tao walked up to him and started laughing at him that he was dying again and would soon be in his own coffin. Bi-yun intervened in their conversation and shouted that it would be too low to kill him like this, And since he was attacked by the spirit beast, he wouldn't have long to live. So it was better to let him lie here in the sun and die. Tao agreed with his son's opinion and decided not to get his hands dirty. Tao then turned to the crowd and announced that the following crimes committed by Bisa were punished by him. And if anyone dared to help him, he would also be punished. Meanwhile, Bisa was just lying on the earth and was in a very bad state. Even though he had finally been resurrected, his soul had taken up residence in this body, and it was naturally horrible since it couldn't remove aura. No matter how many techniques he knew, none of them fit. Only absorption of heaven and earth fit this unnecessary horrible body. But practicing this method is very dangerous. Now that he has been resurrected, he must take revenge on this murderer. After some time it rained and BS was getting better. Magic was magic. To begin with, one had to purify the body and mind, and always absorb heaven and earth. Therefore, Bisa continued to meditate in the open air. Meanwhile, Tao, along with his son, went to see the patriarch. The patriarch wondered if there was such a powerful spiritual force in recent times. Tao began to tell me that it must be an illusion that was caused by overwork. Within 100 miles, nothing could be better than a spiritual master other than him. And then he decided to move on to another topic, namely business. In 10 days, there will be a banquet in honor of his 60th birthday. Master Yixiangyu and his daughter will attend the banquet. So Tao wondered what the patriarch himself thought about it. Although Master Yixiangyu doesn't possess top-notch strength, his skills in making and repairing spirit weapons can be called pride of place in this world. Better take the opportunity to get married. It's a great opportunity to strengthen B's family. The patriarch digested all this information and said that he too had this intention. But he did not know who would be able to fulfill this important task. Tao interrupted him and pointed at Bi Yun. He stated that the latter had great looks, and his strength was also one of the best among the young disciples, so he would like to recommend him. The patriarch didn't mind at all, so he gave him time, and during this time he could train, so he should not miss this opportunity. Bi Yun was of course pleased, and didn't mind at all. The next day, absolutely all the students were discussing that Bi Yun had been beaten up by some pathetic kid. When they went outside, they saw the same Bisu. They were shocked that this guy actually survived, so they began to wonder if they would kill him and help big brother Bi Yun vent his anger, since they would definitely benefit from it. One of the boys liked this idea very much because this way he could try out today's new techniques that he had learned during training. Bisa, meanwhile, looked calm. This student decided to activate the Fuhu Changquan technique. Bisa easily returned with his eyes closed from his technique. Afterward, he opened his eyes and punched him in the body. This kid just flew into the wall and made an imprint. Bisa further pointed his finger at a man in the crowd and said that he was using him to try the power of absorbing heaven and earth. The other guys, however, didn't understand when this guy became so strong. But that didn't matter since they were using a spiritual technique to deal with him. So they decided to both use the death blow technique. Bisa was surprised that these two dared to use the water spiritual technique against him, against a spiritual devouring master. He easily dodged the two techniques. And then I was behind their backs, which even they didn't realize at once. After which, Bisa activated the world absorption technique. This technique is unrivaled. At the sight of Bisa, they both began to cowardly cower in fear, especially when he started walking towards them. Bisa, with a calm, quiet voice, asked what they were going to do now. In response, this guy told him not to worry as he would do everything himself. And after that, they both walked up to the tree and hit their heads with all their might. Bisa wasn't even surprised since these were the disciples of the Bai family, and they were all weak there since these guys' strength was only at the first level of Spirit Eater. Spirit Eater is divided into 100 levels, with each of the 10 levels divided into orders of magnitude. His current strength is level 15. It belongs to the second order. At the same time, he wants to regain his former strength, but he doesn't know how long it will even take, even roughly. Going deeper into thought was useless at that time. Right now, he had a lot of problems, so for now, he had to concentrate on practicing to get stronger. Meanwhile, Tao was talking to the patriarch about Bisa. Tao wanted to eliminate the bastard, because sooner or later he would do something else. The patriarch calmed him down and said that he had already sent men to deal with him. They had just come to the place where Bisa had beaten the students, and all those students were still lying there from being beaten badly. But still one of them was conscious, and he told them that they wanted to take care of BC for Uncle Tao. But he did not die, and even on the contrary, he beat them badly. Tao was furious because he thought they were lying, because they were all level 1 spirit eaters. so he couldn't think that Bisa might not be their opponent at all, especially since there were 4 of them. From such a shout, those students were standing up and started to say that he was right, but also added that Bisa had suddenly become much stronger. After that, Tao approached the patriarch and made her intentions known that she wanted to send some of her men to capture him for questioning. As Bisa was becoming more and more troublesome, the patriarch asked him to shut up and look at the tree. It was broken, so he asked who had broken it like that. Tao started immediately thinking to the storm from last night, and it must have been the one that broke it. Patriarch Bilu told him to think about it, for how ordinary wind and rain broke the century tree. It was obviously broken by spiritual power. Bisa was a waste, but if he really had some talent, it might be good for the Bai family, so he ordered him to leave him alone for a while. Tao, of course, listened to the patriarch, but in his head he knew that if this Bisa wasn't stopped, he could do a lot of things, so he decided to take him on himself. Meanwhile, Bisa decided to walk around the city, and all the students who saw him hid as they didn't want to get in trouble. Bisa was a bit frustrated, although this body could practice absorbing heaven and earth, but it was still too weak. Therefore, he needs to produce some pills to restore his body. He simply didn't see any other choice. Although he knows how to make pills, he still doesn't have the money to buy an alchemical furnace and medicinal materials. Only in a small shop could you find the materials you needed. He approached the shopkeeper and asked him how much a jade hairpin could cost, and handed him his own hairpin. This interested the shopkeeper, and he immediately began to evaluate it. The texture was not bad, the manufactured quality was good, so he was ready to buy it for 500 tael. Bisa began to not be satisfied after all. This was his mother's relic, made of beautiful jade. Therefore, it simply couldn't be worth only 500 tael. The shopkeeper didn't even want to listen to him, as he didn't have much time to argue. So he started to drive him away if he didn't want to sell. Although Bisa was furious, he still had no choice. So he agreed to the 500 tael. He only asked that the hairpin be set aside for him, as he had the intention of buying them back within a month. The shopkeeper smiled and began to reassure him, telling him that this pawnshop had always been honest. After that, Bisa angrily left. The shopkeeper was shocked at how much of a scum of the B family he was. The shopkeeper was shocked at how much he was the scum of the B family. After a while, a lovely lady came into this shop. She came in and asked if there was any news. The shopkeeper began to sign in front of her and told her that he had some materials and jewelry, meters of silk and satin, and more. She approached the jade and said that the quality of this blue jade was not good enough, and the quality of the spiritual stone in this place was too low. After which she called this pawn shop just a trash can. The shopkeeper didn't understand how such a little girl could have such evil eyes. Suddenly she noticed a stiletto that looked good enough. She noticed that it was a special grade of jade and craftsmanship from famous designers, but unfortunately, she saw that it had been laid here by others. The shopkeeper interrupted her as he saw that there was a lot of money to be made here. So he hinted that he could sell to her right now for 5,000 taels. She was shocked at the price of 5,000 taels. The old man already thought the price was too expensive, so he offered to negotiate the price. The girl picked up this stiletto and said that 5,000 is really cheap, as she thought this stiletto would cost at least 30,000 taels. The shopkeeper was overjoyed to have finally sold something expensive and immediately asked her how she would pay, cash, or exchange. She looked at him and told him that the big banks in the city could give him the money, but he just had to give her name. Her name was Isianjuyu Imiana. Meanwhile, Bisa was walking around the city, and after a while he noticed something strange. The man who had been following him ever since he left the pawnshop, he began to guess that this man had been sent by Bitao himself. Fortunately, you can use them too, only in reverse. He didn't give any sign and continued walking through the city, when all of a sudden he was called by a man from the restaurant. It was a working restaurant, and he was inviting him to visit, to see their restaurant, as they had excellent pizza with unique flavors. Bisa pulled out the money and said defiantly that the restaurant was made attractively. The man who was following him did not go into the restaurant, but simply stood at the entrance and waited for him. Meanwhile, Bisa was sitting on the second floor, eating warm pizza with a drink. He had already realized that it would be easy to deceive the pursuer. As for a follow-up plan, it was best not to interfere for now. BS didn't even expect that in this world pizza is quite tasty and not like in other worlds. After a while, he ate and carefully went outside so he wouldn't be seen by his stalker. He also found a cloak somewhere, which he put on himself. He also stole a mask from a carnival shop. That way, he was definitely not to be recognized by anyone as a stalker. And then he went to the pharmacy to get materials and a stove. He saw a huge line of people in front of him who wanted to buy a pill or something like that. Bisa realized that these people were alchemists buying materials or medicines, and their numbers were quite large. After a while, it was Bisa's turn. He went to the shopkeeper and said that he wanted to buy an alchemy furnace. The shopkeeper said that there were 3 kinds of alchemy furnaces sold in this store, so he asked which one he wanted. Bisa held out a 500 tael bill and asked what kind of equipment could be bought for that kind of money. All those who were standing around and heard this were shocked at the insolence of this guy. He was immediately ridiculed by everyone and called him a beggar and a poor man. The shopkeeper explained to him that first-level alchemical furnaces cost at least 3,000 tael. The old man was puzzled that he couldn't afford a good alchemical furnace and materials but still wanted to become an alchemist. Bai Yun only smiled and asked if he could refine a high-quality pill using advanced alchemical furnaces and materials. Since truly, an excellent alchemist should be able to turn dirt into magic. All the others who stood around and heard his stories were very unhappy. The shopkeeper especially didn't understand how a punk like him could teach him how to make pills. Because he had been practicing alchemy for decades, this place is actually called Zijin Pavilion. And just because the old man is able to refine a 3rd-level Zijin pill, someone like him has no right to even open his mouth. Bisa didn't understand what there was to brag about if after decades of training, he can only make these insignificant pills. At the same time, he still really wanted the alchemy furnace, so he suggested that the 2 of them make a bet. For example, if he made a purple gold pill, he would give him the alchemy furnace. And if he failed, he would give him 500 tael. The shopkeeper laughed loudly and thought it was a joke, since the cost of the purple gold pill is more than 500 tael. He got curious and asked what the man used to refine the pill. Bisa didn't hesitate to shout out 50 tael. He could make several purple gold pills by only spending 50 tael on medicinal materials. After some thought, the shopkeeper decided to challenge him. If he could make a purple gold pill for only 50 tael, he would give him the whole store. Bisa was very glad that the old man agreed, for it was easy for him. Then he asked to have everything he needed brought to him and began to list the ingredients. In a few minutes, the old man brought him all the herbs he needed. He really wanted to see how he would use these cheap medicinal materials to make a purple and gold pill. Bisa also asked for a room to be prepared for him, since no one should disturb him while he is working. It was only then that he promised that in an hour, the place would be his own. The shopkeeper was 100% sure that he would lose, since there were only 3 purification formulas for the purple gold pill, but they had nothing to do with these cheap medicinal herbs. Bisa was glad that he had argued with him, for it was no big deal to him. He only asked him to wait for a while, and then he would see for himself. And then he went to work miracles. He lost all his power, but his memory remained the same. The purple and gold pill has a total of 16 prescriptions, except he clearly didn't expect this world to know only 3 recipes. After an hour, he finally made it. It wasn't perfect, of course, but for this world it was just great. Most purple gold pill refining methods were not inherited, so this was the perfect opportunity for him to prove himself. He took this freshly created pill and went back to the alchemy store to the very same shopkeeper. The shopkeeper, as soon as he saw him, began to ridicule him, calling him a great alchemist with a purple gold pill. At that, he was even willing to give him a few more hours. He didn't say anything, but slowly began to pull out a box from under his cloak. Afterward, he shouted that this particular box contained fresh purple gold pills. The shopkeeper thought he was lying and bluffing, but when he opened the box, he was incredibly shocked. He saw before him a purple gold pill in perfect quality, and he even noticed that the temperature of the pill was as it should be, which meant he had really just refined it. The crowd of people who were standing nearby were also shocked, but they were most amazed that Bijing would give this child the Zijin Dan Pavilion. The shopkeeper immediately came out to him and began to apologize about the bet, but Bi Yun interrupted him and said that it was only a joke, as he only needed an alchemy furnace, not a store. After a few minutes, the shopkeeper brought him the best 3rd-grade alchemical furnace in their store called Freedom Like a Heart, and the size of the furnace can be changed at will. In addition, the shopkeeper decided to gift him a collection of several fragrant herbs. He also asked him to accept in the future, whenever he wanted to buy something from his store, a 50% discount on any item. BS gave him a strange look and said, "Then I will be grateful to fate." And then he quietly left. A guy immediately ran up to the shopkeeper and asked him what he was doing, since these precious herbs, plus the 3rd-grade alchemical furnace. In the end, all in all, they lost at least 200,000 tael. The shopkeeper told him to be quiet as he didn't know anything about it, and further tried to explain to him that this person was excellent at alchemy at a young age and was definitely not an ordinary person. The favor done to him today would definitely benefit them in the future. Meanwhile, a closed-door meeting was taking place at the BFU. Master Bitao was visited by an assistant who reported that according to the spy's observations, after Bisa sold the hairpin, he spent the money too, in order to eat, drink, and have fun. Bitao glared at him menacingly and ordered him to continue following, but to take his time and introduce himself carefully. Only then did his son realize that it was much easier to change the country than to understand this guy's character. Bitao was very unhappy because he had the guts to talk about him. He reminded him that he had been training for many years, and last time, he unexpectedly lost to that cripple. Bai Yun started to explain that it was just an accident, and he didn't know what was going on with this kid. Bitao was very displeased as some people were secretly practicing some foreign kung fu, but they can't compare to them. Their level of spiritual power refinement is much stronger. Baito couldn't help but boast and took out a blue gold pill from his pocket, which he had bought at Zijin Pavilion at a high price for his son. Bi Yun immediately asked him why it wasn't a purple gold pill, as the effect of the blue gold pill was much worse. Bai Tao immediately ordered him to shut up and not to say such nonsense, for it is not easy to obtain the purple gold pill, and if he undermined his father's status, he would break his legs. Bi Yun immediately started shouting that he understood everything. Meanwhile, in Bai Si's house, the latter was actually gobbling pills that he had made himself. The healing power of the purple gold pill is really good, and it got rid of his old diseases in his new body. If one takes purple gold pills in large quantities in a short period of time, the potency of the medicine will be greatly reduced. He needs to improve the other pills and take them together. Lin Blood Ji, White Jade Ginseng, Red Crane Feather, and many other things the shopkeeper gave him really helped him. He had given him many good things, and he must have refined many useful pills. During these thoughts, his stomach began to ache a little. He had forgotten that earthly perfection required physical strength. Next, he warmly recalled the pizza he had tried during the afternoon. He wondered if it was available in Bifu's kitchen. So, without wasting time, he went to the kitchen. When he got there, he was surprised that someone else was in the kitchen at that time. Walking in there, he met the very girl who had bought his hairpin. Suddenly, a chicken jumped on Imiana's head, which she was trying to nail and cook. Imiana immediately started screaming as she is afraid of all kinds of animals, especially so close. Bisa yelled for her to stay still and threw his wand at her. It went right into that chicken's neck. When everything had calmed down, Bisa approached Imiana and remarked that she was a beautiful maid, but unfortunately she couldn't even handle a chicken. Yixiangyu Imiana started to resent the chicken, and also wanted to say that she wasn't really a maid, but she stopped abruptly and decided not to say she was an important person. She realized that if this servant, Bisa, found out that she was Yixiangju Imiana, who had come in the middle of the night to prepare food, and therefore was catching this chicken, everyone would laugh at her. So she made the right decision for herself and said that she was actually a new maid. So she didn't know much about anything. She was also a little hungry, so she came. Bisa stopped her and asked her not to explain anymore. He also said that she was lucky to have met him and not someone else. Next, Bisa picked up a knife and began to professionally prepare a meal. After a few minutes, he was already making a very appetizing meal. Yixianju Imiana was shocked at how he cooked so well and thought he was Chef Bufu. Within 10 minutes, the table was completely set. There was pizza, meat, and chicken. Bisa was even a little embarrassed when he heard the praise in his direction, and said that it was just a trifle to him. The delicious food he ate today was the most memorable thing in this world, and he subconsciously reproduced it with divine power. After that, Imiana sat down at the table and started tasting it all. She had no idea that ordinary ingredients in such a combination could be so delicious. She had tasted all the dishes from different countries, but this was the first time she felt happy with food. When Bisa heard that she had tasted all the food in the world, he was a little puzzled, as he thought she was just a maid. She realized that she had made a mistake, and quickly corrected herself by saying that she used to work as a waitress at Wangxianglu, so she had tasted many delicacies. Meanwhile, Bisa began to slowly pass out, and after a few seconds he just got full and fell asleep, thus falling on Imiana's shoulder. She was pleasantly surprised that this guy was so funny. Then she went outside as soon as she finished all her food. She needed to get back to the guest room as soon as possible before her father found out anything. Suddenly she heard a gruff voice from behind her back. "And what am I supposed to know about? Her father was not very pleased that Imiana had gone into the homeowner's kitchen to steal food. Imiana immediately began to justify that she was practicing Taiyisu Minjing because practicing this technique required great physical stamina. Father laughed, as she always has some reason. And then he said that tomorrow after the banquet they would be leaving here, so he asked her not to trouble the others. Imiana didn't understand why he was so eager to please the Bi family if she wasn't so wonderful. Father explained that he has a close relationship with one of the female students of the Bi family, and he was told that the head of the Bi family was interested in marrying her. Imiana only laughed as it wasn't her first marriage proposal. She didn't understand why her father wanted to set her up with them, as much as it was really unpleasant for her. And she also added that if they really wanted to marry her, it depended on what they had to offer them. The elder stopped her and said that since she didn't want it, she didn't have to. All he cared about was that she was happy. The next morning, Bisa woke up in the same kitchen. He slept there all night in the kitchen, with him neatly wrapped in a blanket of some sort. He was very pleased to be taken care of. And since she must be around somewhere, he'd have a chance to see her again. And then, he'd have to pay her back. 2 students came into the kitchen and immediately started asking Bisa what he was doing here on their patriarch's birthday. The second student added that there was still a labor shortage in the hall, so they ordered him to help. Bisa was certainly not happy with this, so he turned around and looked at them menacingly, while asking them if they really wanted to force him to do something. The 2 students were immediately frightened and took all their words back and asked him to make himself at home. They didn't realize what was wrong, as Bisa had completely changed into what he used to be, a completely soft-bodied shrimp. The other student didn't even want to know anything about it, and just decided to avoid him in the future. Meanwhile, the patriarch was already in the restaurant and was thanking everyone who had come to visit them today for his birthday. He especially expressed his thanks to Mr. Yixiangju and his daughter. Yixiangju went up to the patriarch and told him that he was too polite to them. He also asked Imiana to take and congratulate Saint Yerbi. Imiana came up and introduced herself and wishes a blessing like the East China Sea and longevity like Nanshan. The patriarch noticed that Imiana was not only beautiful but also eloquent, so he immediately began to ask if she had a husband. The patriarch noticed that Imiana was not only beautiful but also eloquent. The patriarch told them that there were many young talents in his family who were not yet married. He suggested to them that they take advantage of today's birthday celebration to get married. Imiana realized that the one was a sly fox, since if she refused, she would obviously lose face. Isianju intervened in their conversation and told them that she was just a little girl who was very beautiful. And in recent years, many famous and rich businessmen and famous foreign families had come to them with marriage proposals, but Imiana had rejected them all. Among them, there is even Huang Duoduo, the prince of the Shengqian Empire, and also Seiron, son of the patriarch of the Western Iron Clan. The patriarch was, of course, displeased. He also thought that the point was that the Bai family might not be famous enough to even have a chance. Yixiangyu didn't know what to answer. Isianjuyu Imiana realized that her old man might screw things up now, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. She replied that she had simply once promised that if anyone could handle this spiritual artifact in her hands, he would become her husband. Afterward, she opened the box that contained that very artifact. If any descendant of the Bai family could awaken this white spirit artifact, she would be willing to marry him. The patriarch walked over and looked at this artifact, after which he came to the conclusion that this artifact was a low-grade artifact. Even a spirit eater below level 10 could activate it. He thought that this was some kind of joke, but Imiana replied with a serious face that she never breaks her promises. After a few minutes, a bunch of students gathered and started talking about this artifact, and Imiana herself. They were all in shock at how easy it was to activate this artifact, and they were all imagining getting married already. Baiyun himself approached them and told them to all move away from Imiana as she would be his. All the students immediately began to support him and believe in his victory, and let him pass to be the very first to try this artifact. He approached Imiana and asked for a chance to give it a try. Imiana, of course, could not refuse and allowed him to try. After picking up this artifact, Baiyun started flirting with Imiana, but she simply remained silent in response. After which, Baiyun proceeded to activate this artifact. Just as suddenly, the iron shards of the artifact began to fall one after another. Baiyun didn't understand why nothing happened. Baitao got tired of waiting for him and asked what he was poking around. Baiyun still didn't understand anything, even though he accurately used his whole body spiritual power. But nothing happened. Imiana only smiled when she saw the bewilderment on Baiyun's face, and told him that it wasn't fate to be together. After that, she asked the other guys if they wanted to give it a try. All the students certainly did not want to miss their chance, and absolutely everyone wanted to marry Imiana. Half an hour later, almost everyone had already tried to activate the artifact, but no one was succeeding. Imiana was very pleased with herself, and didn't even hide the fact that she was enjoying herself like no one else could. Just as suddenly, Bisa himself shouted out from the crowd, who was burning with the desire to try it. So he turned directly to Imiana and asked if he had that honor. Imiana remembered him right away, and she realized that he had just lied to her, since she thought this guy wasn't from the B family. He walked over to her and whispered quietly that they were now even, since she had introduced herself to him earlier as the new maid. Bai Tao was furious when he saw him and started yelling at him that he shouldn't be here at all and ordered the others to kick him out of there. Bisa stopped him and reminded him that he was a descendant of the Bai family, so he, like everyone else, could try to activate the artifact. The patriarch thought a bit and still allowed him, for besides him, everyone had already tried it and there was nothing to lose. Bi Tao was still angry about it, and he was ready to write even his name backwards if he could activate this artifact. He was then approached by Bi Yun, who started calling him garbage, and that if he failed to do so, he would lose his authority of the Bai family. This annoyed Bisa so much that he offered him a bet. If he suddenly failed, he would leave B's family immediately, and if he succeeded, he would bow and apologize. Bai Yun didn't see the setup in this bet, and agreed to his terms. Next, Bisa proceeded to the artifact. He realized that these people had never seen such artifacts, and they didn't even know about an artifact like Royal Seven Colors. This spiritual artifact could continuously improve as the wielder's strength increased, but it required special formulas to awaken it. Of course, as a god devourer, he knows how to activate it, and it was easy for him. He highly doubted that anyone would be able to awaken the artifact spirit at all, so he decided to make him embarrass himself in front of the Bai family. After which, Bisa shouted an incantation in his hearing. Red fire, brown soil, yellow gold, green wood, blue water, orange sun, yang and yin. The 5 elements of yin and yang cover this artifact. In the end, Biji had succeeded, and this magic artifact had already recognized him. He approached Imiana with the artifact, and asked her to restrain her communication. Imiana blushed in surprise. She couldn't believe that fate had brought them together again. All the students were shocked at how he had managed to do it, and from now on, they decided to be more respectful to him than before. Bai Tao was shocked and furious at the same time, but his son was even more upset because he had lost to him and now would have to apologize in front of everyone. The patriarch was pleased and not even very surprised. He asked Imiana if she was ready to keep her word. Imiana was, of course, nervous, as this was clearly not the result she had counted on. But still she had given her word and kept it. Though she said it all in an uncertain and trembling voice, Bisa saw that she was worried and decided to stop this circus. He explained to her that there was no need to agree, and the reason he did it wasn't because he was blinded by her beauty like a loser like Bisa, but because he wanted to prove that his family wasn't trash. Bai Yun, of course, got angry at him for his commitment and started waving her hands. Bisa also added that he was still young and not ready to live with such a beautiful woman. So he proposed to terminate the contract, but as a token of appreciation, he asked for the artifact to be given to him. Isianju was satisfied that since Nephew B had some reasons, he wouldn't force the marriage. He also allowed the artifact to be taken away, and the marriage to be postponed for now. The patriarch approached Bisa, and in a quiet voice reminded him that this was a great opportunity to change his life, and he really wanted to give it up. BS only got a chuckle out of it, and further he announced that his name was Bisa, and he was good on his own. So I haven't seen a single speculation as to why he should rely on someone else to change his life. So he refuses. Imiana stood nearby in a stupor, unable to say anything. Yixianju in turn remarked that he looked like him in his youth, and he clearly liked the guy. The patriarch realized that he couldn't force Bisa to get married, so he officially called off the marriage, and also hoped that Mr. Isianju wouldn't hold a grudge against them. Isianju, of course, held no grudges, and was even happy that the Bai family really does have a lot of talent. After which, Bisa reminisced about the bet with Bi-yun. Bai-yun, of course, didn't want to do it, but since he promised to do it, it would have to be done. So he had to get on his knees and publicly apologize to Bisa. Bisa decided in turn to mess with him a bit, so he asked him to speak louder, or he could hear over this crowd. Bai-yun shouted that he apologized to him twice in a row. He swore in his head that he would take revenge for this humiliation, or he wouldn't be able to call himself a man if he didn't. After a few minutes, Bisa approached the patriarch and informed him that since the case was over, he wanted to go back to his room to rest, since he had a big robot to do. The patriarch stopped him and announced that Bisa would now officially reclaim his place in the family and receive his annual money from the family, after which he would begin practicing. Bisa thanked the patriarch for the opportunity and declined. Bitao didn't like that the patriarch was so attracted to Bisa's attention, so he decided to find a way to get rid of him as soon as possible. The next morning, Imiana would be heading home. They were about to leave, but Imiana had disappeared. All they heard was that she had gone somewhere in the morning. In fact, she had been looking for Bisa all morning. Bisa wondered a little what she was doing there since he knew she was leaving today. Imiana asked him a counter-question, asking why he shouldn't take her out if that was the case. Bisa explained that her father didn't really want to give her to him, so he'd rather not get close to her. Imiana started telling him that she had no friends, and since he was her first friend, she wanted to give him this stiletto to remember her by. Bisa immediately recognized his stiletto, which he had recently pawned. It was unexpected for Imiana to give the stiletto to her master. Bisa refused since she had given him a spiritual artifact, and it was better to let her keep the stiletto. He also promised to pay for everything the next time they met. Imiana liked this offer, but she gave him conditions that he had to get stronger to take that stiletto away from her. This arrangement also appealed to Bisa, and he agreed. In parting, she decided to ask him a very tricky question. Bisa agreed to listen to it. Turning around to him, he asked, "Do you really not want me to be your wife?" He in turn blushed sharply and didn't know what to answer. Imiana decided not to wait for an answer and gave him the pills. She also told him that B's family was in danger, so she asked him to be careful. When he took out one pill, he realized that it was a blood toad pill made from the blood of a clam. It was too expensive a gift. Imiana asked him to accept the gift and to consider it as an investment in him. When he became stronger, he would have to pay it back to her in double the amount. And at the end she said, "The green mountains stand still, the rivers will flow for centuries. Time will pass, and we will meet again." Bisa stood puzzled like that for a couple more minutes. He was shocked that she was such an unpredictable woman. Therefore, he decided to accumulate strength after all. Upon arriving home, he began to immediately meditate with the magic artifact. But right in the middle of the simulation, something failed, and the artifact bounced off of him. Although he was able to awaken the Seven Flower Queen artifact, but with his current level of refinement, it was difficult for the artifact to know the master. And also because of his level of refinement, one would need to waste such a pill. He only needed to go to the alchemy store to get some medicinal herbs to create new pills. Therefore, he went to the alchemy shop that very evening. Siren was just there, buying the 10 purple and gold pills ordered by the Academy for this season. This Siren was surprised that the quality of the pill this time was much better than last time. He had already thought that the shopkeeper's level had improved, and he had obtained the rank of a rank 4 alchemist. The shopkeeper didn't expect Saran to have eagle eyes, but still he said that the pills were not made by him, but by someone else. He was ashamed, for this man was much younger than him, but the level of his alchemy is beyond comprehension. In the end, since the quality of this batch was very expensive, Siren decided to pay him an additional 3,000 tile. While the shopkeeper was rejoicing at the extra payment, Bisa entered the shop. He asked for 3 burdocks, 2 bloody bodhi, and a spruce turtle shell. Siren gave him a strange look and suspected something. The shopkeeper gathered all the necessary ingredients in just a minute and handed them to Bisa. He, in turn, thanked him for his quick work. Siren was very interested in this man, as he didn't come for pills but for herbs, and he was also wearing a mask. The shopkeeper told him that he was the alchemist who made this batch of pills, because it was normal for high-level alchemists to hide their identity. The shopkeeper told him that he was the alchemist who had made this batch of pills, as it was normal for high-level alchemists to hide their identities. Meanwhile, on the way home, someone started following Bisa. He, in turn, realized that he had firmly established his identity in the pill store, and now he didn't need to look for herbs. After a few minutes, he himself noticed that someone was following him. He immediately thought it was Bi Tao's men, as they were inexperienced in following him. Meanwhile, Biyun and his boys were standing near the huge crowd. They saw a large gathering of people and decided to go there. There sat a little beautiful girl who was crying and selling herself. Biyun approached her and asked her how much the little beauty was for sale. She turned around in tears and replied that as long as the Lord was willing to pay 100 tael for her father's funeral, Xiaoluo was willing to serve the Lord and would never go against him. Biyun didn't stand on ceremony and grabbed her hand. Xiaoluo immediately started asking what he was doing. Bai Yun promised to buy a thin wooden coffin and throw this corpse into a mass grave. In doing so, she wouldn't need to be his girlfriend. Just being his concubine would suffice. Meanwhile, Bisa himself came up to them and asked Bai Yun if he would also keep his uncle Bi Tao. He also made it clear that he'd better not save his money and go buy himself a concubine. Bai Yun was furious when he saw him and ordered him not to even go near him. Bisa stopped him and told him that he didn't come to cause trouble, but to buy himself a maid. He approached Xiaoluo and gave her enough money to bury her father with honor. Xiaoluo was very grateful. Bai Yun began to resent and yell at Bisa that he was the one who came first, and the latter began to brazenly pry. Bisa decided to mock him publicly and started saying that he gave a penny even though he was a member of Bai's family. The crowd, when they heard who he was, just laughed. Bai Yun was furious that he dared to humiliate him like that in front of everyone. So he activated the technique and decided to finish him off right there. Bisa was not confused and decided to play his minigame after all. BS still didn't appreciate Bai Yun before hitting him. Bai Yun punched Bisa's chest with great speed, but that blow was stopped by some kind of barrier, and then he was thrown off at a high rate of speed. Bai Yun didn't understand what had even happened. He ended up making a huge imprint of his body in the wall. Bisa also didn't understand why Bai Yun flew away from him if he wasn't even defending himself, and just a little bit began to speculate that it might be the very power of the artifact. Bai Yun couldn't leave it like that, and ordered Bai Tan and Bi Xiao to teach that bastard a lesson for all it was worth. The two were very angry that the bastard had dared to hurt their brother, and decided to take revenge. Seron suddenly intervened in their conversation, and decided to explain to the two that Bisa was obviously just defending himself. The two were shocked at the insolence of this guy, who dared to interfere in Bisa's family's affairs. Then he introduced himself in front of everyone as Seron, a first-stage student of the Spirit Eater Academy. The crowd immediately began to whisper, for everyone knew that this was the best spiritual master academy in the entire continent. All the students of this academy are 1 in a million geniuses. The two students stopped and thought about the consequences that might await them if they engaged in combat with him. They concluded that it was better not to take any chances, and began to retreat, taking Bai Yun with them. After that, Bisa approached the girl who was being abused by Bai Yun, and the latter asked her to beware of Bai Yun. He also advised her to leave Fengzhou City as soon as possible. This Xiaoluo girl didn't understand why a master like him would want to chase away the maid he paid. Siren intervened and said that the little girl was beautiful and affectionate, so he advised them not to give up on her. This idea, of course, did not please B.S., for he never liked to be taken care of. He also thanked him for his help and finally introduced himself to him as Bisa. Siren immediately admitted that he liked people like him who were willing to stand up for others, so he counted on them to be a great fit. Bisa wanted to continue this conversation, so he invited everyone to eat. But Xiaoluo refused as she has to bury her father. They didn't bother her and gave her one last goodbye. Xiaoluo was delighted with Bisa, and although he didn't want to accept her as a maid, but she would always remember her kindness. Meanwhile, Bai Yun had just been carried to Bi Tao's house. Once all of Bai Yun's wounds were bandaged, he turned to his father and asked for help to deal with Bisa once and for all. Father didn't even know what to reply to Bai Yun, as Bisa's strength is growing at a tremendous rate. Especially the patriarch attaches great importance to him, so it would be hard to attack him. But still, Bi Tao did not back down from this plan. Suddenly, they were interrupted by Biao Xian, Bai Yun's cousin. He said that anything was possible, they just needed to come up with a plan where Bisa would be banished from the Bai family. Bai Yun immediately asked him why he was here, and not at the Soul Eater Academy. Biao San explained that he happened to come to Fengzhou on business and was currently visiting them. With the hope of taking revenge on BZ, Bai Yun arose and began to question Biao San about the plan. The cousin bent down to Bai Yun and promised that this plan would be flawless. However, there was something he needed to do. Bai Yun was not thrilled that this plan was so dangerous. Biao Zhen calmed him down and promised that he wouldn't harm him since he was his cousin after all. Meanwhile, while walking around town, Cironi and BS came to eat at a pizza place. They ordered pizza as well as appetizers and went to the table. This meeting was fated, so Siren offered him a drink to that, but it would be tea instead of alcohol, as he didn't want to get drunk in broad daylight. Bisa didn't believe in a chance encounter, as he knew that he had been following him as far back as Zijin Pavilion. Siren was puzzled as to how he had found out and why he had not told him at once. Bisa laughed at him, for then he had to pay for the food too. Siren confessed that he was in admiration of him, and suggested that he join the Academy of Spirit Eaters, as he was a master in alchemy, and such talents he had never met before. There was only a small problem. Bisa didn't know much about the Spirit Eater Academy, so he asked Siren to tell him more about the academy. Siren realized that this was his chance to recruit such a talent, so he began to tell him that the Spirit Eater Academy was the best on the mainland, specializing in training Soul Eater masters. Since the academy was founded, it has produced countless geniuses. The academy is divided into Chixiao Academy, Lanqiong Academy, and Jingyu Academy to train students according to ability, and the academic aura is a bit denser than anywhere else. Suddenly, his story was interrupted by a student who flew straight into this pizza place. He pointed his finger at Bisa and threatened that he was now in big trouble, so he ordered him to follow him where he would receive his punishment. Bisa understood that Biyun immediately ran to complain as soon as he was beaten up, and was not surprised at all. This guy was simply furious, for he didn't understand how that guy even had the nerve to mention Biyun's brother if he had killed him. Bai Yun stood up from the table and said that he couldn't have died because he had just knocked him down. Siron decided to support Bisa, and stated that he was present there at the time, and although Biyun was bleeding, he was not dying. This guy decided to show them everything in reality so that they would believe him, and ordered them to follow him, where they will see the body of Biyun's older brother lying in the hall. As they approached the palace, they could already hear Bitao's cry of grief for his son. He fell on his knees before the patriarch, and asked for justice to punish Bisa according to family rules. Bisa entered the hall, and immediately started the conversation by mentioning the family rules, namely the disciples of the Bai family should not bully the weak. And this Biyun was just molesting a woman in public, so he just needed to be punished. Bitao stated that Biyun was just a child and he was just clearly jealous of him just to take the opportunity to hurt the killer. Bisa only laughed off his accusations since Biyun is in his 20s and everyone present could testify that it was Biyun who attacked him first. Siron came into the conversation and wanted to testify on the matter for Bisa. He claimed that it was indeed Biyun. He had tried to sneakily attack Bisa and was injured afterward. Although the injury was severe, it was by no means fatal. The patriarch stood up from his throne and asked Saron's nephew what he was even doing here. He explained that he was studying at the academy and that he had met Bisa, but he was also sure that he was innocent. Bai Tao still claimed that in any case, Biyun's death was also related to Bisa, and asked to act according to the rules of the Bai family. The patriarch thought for a while and said that if it was confirmed that Biyun's death was related to Bisa, then he would give permission to kill him that second, or ban him from using skills in accordance with the family rules and banish him from the house. And if Bisa has nothing to do with the case, that Bitao should pay him and forgive the debt. Without thinking long, Bisa said that he had medical skills, so he asked to let him check on Biyun's brother's body. If he really died, regardless of the cause of death, he was willing to be punished. Bai Tao allowed his son's body to be escorted out in that case. Bisa walked over to the body and took his hand. He felt no pulse or breath, and the body was cold and devoid of vitality. In that case, he decided to feed Brother Biyun a pill and asked the others if they were okay with it. He explained that if their stomach and intestines are not working well, they should carry this pill with them, because if they take this pill, their liver and intestines will be cleansed. Bai Tao immediately began to forbid giving him any pills. Bisa didn't understand Bi Tao since Biyun was already dead, and there was nothing to be afraid of. Even if this pill was actually poison, it wouldn't be a big deal. He was dead anyway. Bi Tao still didn't give permission as he didn't want his son to be experimented on in any way, and to desecrate the body at all. Bisa assumed that Biyun was in anabiosis, and he only wanted to help. But Bi Tao didn't agree. Then Bisa started to smile, as he realized that the man was afraid that if it really was poison, his son would actually be killed because of it. Bai Tao had already even approached the patriarch, and asked if it was wrong to protect the dead son's body, and stated that Bisa was trying to desecrate Biyun's body, so he asked him to stop him. The patriarch stated that he would not favor anyone, but he would never allow anyone to be offended. Therefore, he allowed the medicine to be fed to Biyun's body. Bai Tao thunderously reminded him that if he dared to harm his son's body, he would simply destroy him. Siren entered the conversation again, saying that he had studied the varieties of anabiosis in college, so he asked why he shouldn't examine Biyun's body. The patriarch did not hesitate to say that he had no objections. Bitao turned pale and quietly, uncertainly agreed to this venture. Next, Siren walked over to Biyun's body and began to check it. Siren actually pulled the dark matter out of his body. Bisa saw all this and wondered why the aura of this spell was so similar to the devastated soul that had killed him that very day. He began to guess that the person who killed him had something to do with the Spirit Eater Academy. Just as suddenly, Bi-yun woke up after a few seconds. Most of the people standing around were at a loss as to what had even happened. Meanwhile, a caustic smile slowly appeared on Bi-yun's face. Siron further explained to everyone that although this anabiosis technique was magical, it was forbidden to be researched and used by colleges because of its strong side effects. Bai Tao gave him a strange look and asked what kind of side effects. At that second, Bi-yun jumped up and started shouting that he was an invincible spirit eater. And then he started running all over the gym and talking complete nonsense. Siren sighed and said that loss of consciousness and dementia, it's incurable. Bai Tao still hadn't given up hope, and after hugging his son, he asked what had happened to him and if he even remembered him. Then Bi-yun turned to his father and asked if they were trying to frame Bisa with anabiosis. Bi Tao got nervous and said that he was talking nonsense. Bisa turned to the patriarch and said that Bi-yun was probably telling the truth. He also suggested that Bi Tao's uncle had abused the techniques to frame his family, and according to the family's rules, he should be punished. The patriarch was very displeased. And as for the punishment, seeing that Bi-yun had become insane, he and Bi Tao would have their perfection destroyed, and they would also be expelled from the Bi family. Bi Tao fell on his knees in front of the patriarch and began to beg for forgiveness for the sake of the family's years of devotion. The patriarch decided to let him know that no one would obviously forgive him and activated his technique. At the same time advised him to blame himself for his greed. But all of a sudden, Bi Tao suddenly jumped up and pulled out a dagger from under his sleeve and started flying at the patriarch. He clearly wasn't going to give up so easily. Siren decided to intervene and used his iron control technique. He sent his dagger straight into the wall. Bai Tao was simply shocked and in a stupor at this development, after which the patriarch decided to finally deal with this traitor. He waved his technique right next to his face, from what he flew with all speed in the opposite direction from the patriarch. Bisa was a bit even shocked when he found out that Siren had the iron control technique. It was new to him that disciples from the academy actually possessed hidden trump cards. Meanwhile, Bi-yun walked over to Bi Tao's body and started kicking him with his foot while calling him dead. The patriarch walked over to Siren and thanked him, as he'd been careless and a bit thoughtful. Siren didn't see his help, because even if he kept flying at him, he wouldn't be able to do any harm. Afterwards, Bisa approached the patriarch and asked him to fulfill his request. He decided to listen to him attentively. Bisa wanted to go to study at the Spirit Eater Academy, so that he could glorify his Bai family in the future. The patriarch would be glad if Bi Tao and his son possessed such realization, they wouldn't end up like this for sure. Therefore, he granted his request. He also instructed him to go to the vault to pick up 3,000 taels of silver for travel expenses. Siron came into the conversation and wanted to go along with Master Bisa, but unfortunately he had errands to run. With his new strength, passing the college test wouldn't be a problem. Bisa was sincerely appreciative of his words. Biao San stood in the shadows and watched this whole circus. He was very happy that Bi Tao died. Bi-yun became crazy, so he would take over their family property. The next day, Bisa packed his things and set off. He took his horse with him to get to the academy even faster. After some time on the road, Bisa decided to take a break. There was a small lake near it. He thought this one would be the best solution to rest and cool off, so he dove right in. In fact, the water was cool, and Bisa was awake well enough. Opening his eyes as he blurted out, he quickly blushed. Because I saw a naked girl in front of me. They met gazes, and although this girl blushed a little, she was still very angry with him. Bisa decided to play the fool, and started waving his hands while saying that he was unfortunately blind, and couldn't see this magnificent scenery in front of him. That girl decided not to stand there in front of Bisa, but quickly returned to the shore and began to dress. The girl decided not to stand there in front of Bisa, but quickly went back to the shore and started to dress. But as soon as he turned around to look at the girl again, he saw a furious girl flying at him to deal with him. Bisa realized that things were bad and no one believed in his acting. This girl used her whip to take him down. Bisa remarked that she had a strong spiritual power. Then the girl asked how he could avoid her whip if he was blind. Bisa, meanwhile, quickly dressed and explained that he just didn't want to embarrass her. But she didn't care since he had seen her naked body, which meant he had to pay for it anyway. After which she further continued to attack him, and finally poked him in the eyes that had been peeking out at her. Bisa had a good reaction and managed to dodge her attack. It was so powerful and fast that it easily chopped a huge tree. But still, a small scratch appeared on Bisa's cheek. He certainly didn't want to be rude to her. but since she's a girl, she's forcing him. This girl didn't mind seeing what he could do. Bisa began to prepare for the attack and started to concentrate. This girl realized that now could be a strong blow, so she also decided to concentrate on it. But Bisa had a completely different plan, and that was to escape from there. She was a little shocked, for she thought something big was going to happen. She just couldn't let him escape and chased after him. After how many minutes, Bisa was a little faster and managed to hide nearby, and she in turn sought him out. And since she could sense people's spiritual power, it was easy. Even if he had weak spiritual power. Bisa, meanwhile, sat in a tree right above her and ate an apple. He decided to make conversation with her and asked her why she was so angry if he just looked at her body, and added that her figure was unremarkable. This finally got to this girl, and she flew at him to pulverize him with her bare hands. Just as suddenly her foot was trapped and wrapped in rope. She was shocked because she hadn't expected a trap, especially not from him. She was suspended upside down, so she had to hold up her dresses so he wouldn't see anything else. At that she even blushed and said that it was mean to trap people like that with such a trap. Bisa didn't understand what was wrong with this beautiful, ingenious trap. Afterward, he turned around and said goodbye that she needed to cool off. Just as suddenly he heard some strange sound behind him. Bisa was a bit even in a stupor as he saw her break the tree she was suspended from with one technique. She was really angry. At first she'd wanted to teach him a little lesson, but now that one really pissed her off. She activated her technique and fire began to appear around her. Even the grass around her was already starting to burn. Bisa tried to stop her and warned that if she used her powerful technique here, the entire forest would definitely burn down. As suddenly she felt very sick, and then she started spitting up blood. She just picked herself up and fell to the ground while unconscious. Bisa was surprised that she just stopped and fell down. I even thought it was some kind of sneaky trick. But still, he decided to go check on her. As he got closer, he realized that not forcefully awakening his strength and using a powerful skill in a highly emotional state had led to the attack. So taking her on his shoulders, he went to the nearest cabin, and they got there in the late afternoon. Bisa immediately rushed to restore and heal her. He used his secret technique to make the treatments more effective. Ta began to barely come to her senses, but very slowly. Bisa didn't fully understand the situation, as there is a powerful spiritual force in her body, but it seems that it doesn't belong to her. While he was recovering it, that fire-type spiritual power tried to absorb him. Bisa was in a very bad situation since, if he lost, this girl would die. Therefore, it was necessary to try to absorb the fire energy forcibly. He gathered his wits and decided to end the matter. He picked it up and activated his stronger technique, but this energy was too strong. It could simply tear apart his spiritual sea. Just as suddenly he felt his artifact vibrate. He realized that this artifact was helping him absorb energy. It was very difficult, but still Bisa managed to do it. But he also had to release the excess energy from his body, or he would be torn apart. Fortunately, it was raining outside and he could use the fire safely. So BS worked until the wee hours of the morning. Even then, the girl herself had even woken up. She was puzzled, as it had been a long time since she had slept so sweetly, and then quickly came to her senses when she realized she was in some kind of lovely cabin. She even thought that Bisa had done bad things to her while she slept. So going outside, she was ready to find him and destroy him into powder. But she quickly stopped when she saw a very ancient landscape in front of her. Namely, all the trees that were nearby were completely burned, and the grass as well. Then she saw Bisa, who had just finished his exercises and was about to go back to the lodge. And as soon as he turned around, he saw her, and he was completely naked at the time. She threw a log at him and ordered him to get dressed. Bisa conclusively got dressed, but still didn't understand why she was acting like this with her savior. She turned around and said in a rough voice that she didn't ask to sleep with her, and asked him if he had taken advantage of her unconsciousness. Bisa explained that his technique wasn't that strong. He could only absorb her energy with body contact. And further, he wondered, since the fire energy in her body was strong, it was devouring her for some reason. Although she was saddened, she explained that this energy is a blessing from God and a curse. As soon as she was born, a fire energy of unknown origin appeared in her body. Even though it helped her practice faster than the others, but because of that, her body was shrouded in flames, and no one could get close to her. Not only that, but she must bathe regularly, otherwise that energy will consume her. Bisa wasn't surprised that her condition had deteriorated so rarely. He had to stop his bathing because of it, and the situation worsened dramatically. She didn't understand how he still had the courage to say that, because if he hadn't watched her bathing, none of this would have happened. Bisa calmed her down and said that they were even now because he had saved her life. She wanted to object, but Bisa quickly grabbed her cheeks and started pulling them. He also said that she was exaggerating things too much, but that it was quite normal in this situation. But she didn't listen to him then, as she wondered why he hadn't gotten burns when he had touched her. She didn't realize for a few more minutes how he was able to touch her body and not get burns. Bisa explained to her that it was because of the absorption of flame energy. Even though she was happy that someone had touched her for so many years, she still ordered him not to touch her face. That one decided to play a joke on her and said that her character was so tough and arrogant that even with a normal body temperature, no one would dare to approach her. She decided not to be impatient and said that many talents were interested in her at the Spirit Eaters Academy. She also asked him to leave her alone, for she didn't like him. The only thing Bisa realized was that she was also a student at the academy. He further told her that he was here to take the entrance exam for the academy, so he offered to travel together. She wasn't even surprised, since the entrance exam of the Spirit Eater Academy is a fierce competition, if only one is savvy, but that won't help much. Bisa only asked that he shouldn't underestimate him. After which, she decided to ask him if he had already made a contract with a spirit beast, since the entrance exam required the candidate to have a contract with a spirit beast. Bisa was a bit in a stupor as he really didn't make a contract, for it was a bit troublesome. A spirit eater could have no more than 3 contracts with spirit beasts in his lifetime. She decided to also thank him for saving her, and gave him a reward. It was the nailing stone, and given his knowledge, the nailing stone could be used to improve other artifacts and to imprison spirit beasts. Before reaching the academy, he needed to find and imprison a spirit beast. In that case, Bisa decided to take the award. He also did the purification and got a successfully processed nailing, and he also expressed his immense gratitude to her. Although this girl's strength is mediocre, she is skilled at manipulating spiritual power, and as soon as they decided to set out on the road, they felt and also heard something not clear. They realized that it was a spirit beast with a very tremendous speed. A contract with a spirit beast could only be made while hunting it. Bisa didn't expect to encounter it in such a beast place. Walking forward a bit, Bisa noticed the blood and realized that someone had tried to kill the spirit beast, but he had wounded it, and the injury was pretty severe. The girl was amazed. Somewhat the same one was attentive. It was a lightning cat with different eyes made of gold and silver. Its speed is outstanding, and it possesses lightning techniques that are considered the best among the rest. Right now, the best option is to contract this beast. It is currently Bisa's limit. The cat was about to run away, but Bisa never missed a benefit to his favor. Bisa quickly activated the artifact the girl gave him. She in turn was amazed at what a modern fusion of spiritual techniques. She was excited to see how many more secrets this guy had. Suddenly, some guy came up to them and started shouting how they dared to approach his delicacy. Bisa didn't understand what delicatessen he was talking about at first, even thinking he was opening a restaurant. The girl explained to him that the Delicatessen Club was a dark organization that relied on killing spirit eaters, using their skills for self-improvement, and looting spirit weapons. This kid went on to say that he chased this cat for 7 days and nights before seriously injuring it, and they're just trying to take it from him. He was very angry with them and was ready to kill them. In principle, these two didn't feel sorry for him, since that guy wasn't the kindest person, so it would be a matter of duty to get rid of him. That said, the girl hoped that Bisa wouldn't want to fight head-on, since Bisa was 5 levels lower than this person, and he had barely made a contract with the spirit beast. The delicacy sounded good to Bisa, but he didn't expect these guys to do such evil things. The kid couldn't stand those words and shot his technique at him. Bisa easily dodged his shot and began to mock him, thereby just toying with him and trying to piss him off. This kid told him to take his time as all the fun was ahead, since that shot of his just bounced off the ground straight up. That one charge turned into a bunch of shots. This guy was laughing caustically and was in anticipation of their deaths. This was the fire flower technique he had worked hard on for half a year. Once in this array, one should just wait for the person to be cut into pieces. Bisa didn't realize what the hell was going on and asked the girl to cover for him. The kid only laughed at them, for it was useless to resist, and advised them to just wait for their death. Bisa noticed that the spiritual energy had actually materialized, which was surprising even to him. The girl saw the calmness on Bisa's face and assumed that he knew a way out. Bisa turned to her and told her not to worry, for he was already tired from chasing the spirit, and slowly took out the bottle of pills Imiana had given him. Meanwhile, this guy was indeed already tired, but he had enough strength, as he really wanted to see the desperation on their faces before they died. This started to piss Bisa off a bit, and he ordered him to shut up and not grab such a pathetic array. Even though he himself has level 15, but he could easily break his array. This guy was shocked when he saw the blood toad pill in Bisa's hands. It is a high-rank pill and costs an incredible amount of money. The girl was also puzzled when she saw the rare pill. But with his current refinement base, the spiritual energy in his body would overflow and explode. Therefore, she didn't see the point of these pills. She even started to think that it was just a bluff to scare the enemy. But none of this was a bluff, and he really did eat that pill. The fellow laughed off him, for such a great pill had been wasted. That being said, the guy kept attacking them. Bisa told him to calm down and also promised to destroy his array. The girl didn't understand how he was really able to stabilize the energy. After that, Bisa decided to break through the guy's technique right towards him. The one in turn was in anticipation of having his arm blown apart in a split second. But Bisa, after all, was able to break through. He flew into the guy with great speed and knocked out some of his teeth. Also, while he was flying from the impact, he broke through a couple trees. Bisa was glad he made such a good shot. The girl had been standing next to him with her mouth open the entire time, although it didn't look like all of his strength. But his strength was clearly beyond normal practitioners. Even more surprising was how he didn't suffer from the side effects of the pill. Meanwhile, that guy had a headache, which is not strange, because he'd made a huge dent in the rock with his body. Bisa decided to bring him to his senses and started pinching his face. He then bent over him and informed him that, first of all, he didn't care who he was there. He beat him up because of the offensive behavior. Secondly, it didn't matter how long he chased that cat. Everything goes to the winner, and if he took it, it's his, and no one else can take it. Of course he understood, and he admitted that he was wrong, and began to ask to be released. Bisa laughed and said that he should pay for it. But money, unfortunately, he didn't have, and he didn't know what to do. Bisa started undressing him and looking for valuable items. He was surprised at how many things this guy was carrying around. Bisa even found all sorts of ingredients in many pills. He also saw the talisman of the 4 clouds, and open heavens could enhance cultivation. Peaky Dan strengthens the attacks of spirit beasts. The girl didn't know anything about these artifacts at all. But even more, she didn't understand what family he was from since he had such keen eyesight and high knowledge. Meanwhile, the guy was watching it all and was furious that he dared to go through his stuff. So he very slowly started to deliver the needle, which Bisa didn't notice. This needle is impregnated with a bone-drying poison. If poisoned with it, a person's insides will gradually burst and all sorts of blisters will appear on the skin. It's so painful, you'd rather die than endure it. He shot right at BS. At this point, he was just holding the token and turned around sharply, and the needle ended up hitting the token directly, causing it to bounce back. Bisa didn't even realize what the hell it was. Eventually, the needle rebounded and went right into the guy's knee. The one cried out in pain like a little girl. Then he started to run away, shouting at him that he would take revenge on him. Bisa did not understand him, as he did not want to kill him, but only wanted to scare him. Bisa decided to see the rest when he got to his destination. The girl also asked where his spirit animal was. Bisa laughed since he was already inside the stone. The girl was very surprised at his words. Since a spatial spiritual weapon could store objects and so on, but living beings couldn't be stored in it. But even more, she wondered if she had any other pills. 3 hours later, they reached Mount Bisheng. At the top of the mountain is the Spirit Eater Academy. The mountain was shrouded in silvery clouds, and with a pleasant breeze, it was not a bad place to cultivate. Suddenly, they saw some 2 people get hit and start falling down the steps. This was done by the 3 thugs, who repeated to everyone that if they wanted to climb the mountain and register, they should at least overpower them. And if they don't have a spiritual beast, or if they have a weak spiritual beast, it is better not to even try. Spirit Eater Academy is the #1 academy in the entire world. Only true dragons can enter. Bisa assumed that this was the first test. The girl explained that it was just a preliminary test to exclude smart people who came without spirit beasts. From all this, he only realized that she didn't believe in him at all, that he would pass the test. He called her big sister. She looked at him and ordered him not to call her that again. Then Bisa decided to offer her a bet. If he could pass the test, then she would then become his subordinate. She was shocked and didn't know what to say. Bisa saw the surprise on her face and realized that she was thinking of something else. He decided to explain to her that he had heard her say that many people were following her, and if she became his subordinate, they would just give up and stop following her. She'd noticed that he might be brave enough to even dare to offer her such a thing. But he doesn't know who she is at all. Bisa asked who she was. She said to forget it, for he would not pass the test anyway, so she decided to accept his agreement. After which, Bisa approached the thugs and stated that he had come here to register for the Spirit Eater Academy. The bully told him that he had heard him talking to Sister Long. Not only did he not have a spirit beast, but he was also claiming his sister's beauty. It was just insulting to him, so he summoned a shadow wolf to tear him to pieces. Long asked Jang Daju not to kill him, but he didn't even listen to her at that moment. Bisa was a bit sad as he didn't want to show his trump card, but from the looks of it he will have to. He pulled out the nailing and freed his spirit beast from its shackles. BS Cat simply destroyed the shadow wolf in a second. Jang Daju just stood there shocked at what he saw. Meanwhile, higher up on the mountain stood a young, important guy who was watching it all. He was surprised by his spiritual technique, and also that this guy even knew the techniques of a great master. It was very interesting for him to watch him. When Jang Daju saw the corpse of his spirit beast, he felt sick to his stomach. Afterward, Bisa turned to Jang Daju and asked him if he could now see his spirit beast. Even Long noticed that he didn't use any artifacts, but the attack was extremely powerful. Jang Daju still hadn't come to his senses and couldn't believe that his shadow wolf had been killed. Bisa didn't understand why he thought that a spirit beast was an animal. It's just a serious injury. So he asked the others to take him away and he would recover in 2 months. Jang Daju in turn asked his boys to deal with Bisa. They obeyed Jang Daju and jumped on Bisa with swords. But something stopped them, and it was as if they were frozen in midair. In fact, their feet are icy. Some other important guy approached them and turned to Jang Daju, ordering him to accept defeat when he was defeated by even a rookie. Even funnier to him was that the poor newcomer wanted to be beaten up by a crowd. Bisa first thought it was ice techniques, but then guessed that it was the ability of his spirit beast. But the beast was also not visible, which was very similar to an invisible beast. Jang Daju decided to explain everything to Charan and told him that his shadow wolf was killed by him. And he can't just forget about it. Charan grew tired of these ramblings and simply slapped him across the face and ordered him to shut up and endure if not able to fairly overpower his opponent. After which, he walked up to Bisa and introduced himself as Xiao Charan, the deputy senior 3rd year of the Spirit Eater Academy. Bisa also introduced himself properly and asked Brother Xiao if they would let him in now that everyone was convinced that he had a spirit beast. Charan even smiled a little and said that he could fool others with a little trick, but it wouldn't work on him. His spirit beast is most likely just a soul image caused by the core of the spirit beast. So since he came to fool the whole academy, he can't let him go any further. In doing so, he summoned his spiritual beast to make him more frightening. Bisa immediately realized that it was the silver fox Bingmai. Although lightning energy could hold back ice, but it was just a soul image that needed energy. And next, Charan decided not to wait, and ordered his spirit beast to go on the attack. From the first ice attack, Bisa successfully dodged it. Long only realized out of everyone present that Xiao Churan should be feared. He was instantly able to make a block of such ice without water. If this continued, he might die. So she needed to help Bisa. Bisa in turn decided to continue the battle and had already used his cat. But Charan's spirit beast wasn't even harmed by his attack. Charan wanted to counterattack and was about to use a technique. Suddenly he noticed snowflakes near him, and afterward it got icy. Bisa looked up and saw the silhouette of a man. He was surprised that this man could change the weather in a small area. Everyone started whispering amongst themselves that it was the same Ji Shuangyi, one of the 8 spirit generals at the Soul Eater Academy. Master of ice techniques, he immediately asked if he would study here. Bisa only confirmed his words. Afterwards, Shuang asked Bisa if he wanted to become his disciple. At the same time, Bisa's strength seemed very familiar for some reason. Absolutely everyone standing around was shocked by Ji Shuang's statement. The teachers of the academy could only take one person as their personal disciple once every 5 years, and he would open up many privileges. Meanwhile, the ice on Churan's body began to crack slowly but surely. Ji Shuang immediately asked the man what he was up to. Churan in turn realized his mistake, especially when teacher Ji Shuangyi himself stopped him, and also said that Brother B has an outstanding talent and a unique gift. It was a great fortune for their academy, and also glad that teacher Ji Shuangyi favored him. At the same time, in his head, he wanted to destroy him and decided to report the rule violation to the disciplinary department. Except that BS slowed him down. He didn't understand how the one could accept him so quickly when he hadn't passed all the tests and was already accepted. That was why he disagreed with his decision. Everyone who heard this nonsense was shocked. No one understood why this kid would give up such good fortune. Then Ji Shuang decided to inquire and asked why the latter was refusing to become his disciple. Bisa didn't want to tell the real reason, so he decided to make up an excuse so as not to draw attention to himself. Then he came up with an idea and told everyone that he was not fit to be his teacher. He also explained that no one in this world had the right to be his teacher. There was silence for a few seconds after these words. No one understood his logic. Long couldn't bear the embarrassment, and tried to explain to Bisa that if it wasn't for Teacher Ji, he would have been killed by now. Bisa didn't understand why he would have been killed. Ji Shuang in turn laughed and even decided to play along with him and said that this was indeed a good reason. But he also added that he also had reasons for taking him as a disciple. He even promised to let him enter the Qianlin cave. There he could make a contract with the spirit beast. This was the first time Bisa had heard of this cave. Long approached him and quietly told him that Qianlin Cave has a lot of rare beasts that have been captured by the teachers of the academy for 1,000 years. This is a secret place of the Soul Eater Academy, so no one knows about it. Charan also bent down to Ji Shuang's ear and reminded the teacher that the school had a rule that only students who got an A grade in the annual evaluation could get in. Ji Shuang interrupted him and told him that the principal had once rewarded him with a chance to get in, but he had barely used it. Bisa, meanwhile, was thinking of a cunning plan. If he could obtain a spirit beast in this cave, it would save a lot of time. He could become its disciple and enjoy its support, and by doing so, he could get rid of any unnecessary problems in the academy. After accepting the pros and cons, he agreed to this venture and paid his respects to Master Ji Shuang, after which Ji Shuang asked to follow him. Long didn't understand how this person could be so lucky. Long went with them, and on the way she began to lecture Bisa. Namely, to become a disciple, one must at least bow 3 times before the master. Bisa would ask her to be affectionately silent, for the master had not said anything, so it was optional. Charan watched it all, and he was getting angrier and angrier by the second. He didn't understand how the man dared to break the rules, and he decided to get back at him for it. As they got closer to the academy, they saw a huge queue of students. Also, they had already announced that all enrolled students would go to the appropriate practice rooms, where they would have their spiritual power level checked, and then they would receive the appropriate tokens. At the same time, the queue was moving very, very slowly. Ji Shuang walked up to the guards along with Bisa and Long and introduced his personal disciple, and said that he needed to check his strength level. The guards were even a little nervous when they saw Ji Shuang. It was only then that Bisa began to realize that it was worthy of being the #1 academy. It is truly a magnificent structure. After which, Long informed Ji Shuang that she had business to attend to and needed to divert. At this last, Bisa decided to remind her of their argument. Even though she was furious about it, she didn't say anything to him and just furiously walked away. Ji Shuang saw this whole situation and decided to explain to Bisa that Long Xia is hot. She is a famous personality in the academy, and he was the first one who dared to talk to her like that. Bisa didn't take it all seriously and thought that the teacher was exaggerating. Bisa decided to change the subject and asked him why he had chosen him to be his disciple. Ji Shuang decided to tell the truth, namely that he reminded him of someone, but he didn't want to go any further. First, he decided to take him to the dormitory. Bisa became a little nervous after saying that, and began to really believe that the teacher didn't have any quirks. When he decided to meditate in the evening, he had another nightmare from his past life, about how in his past life he was the only one left, and still refused to obey the enemy. These few big men in trench coats decided to give him one last chance to join them, and if he refused, he would die. But Bisa didn't want to agree to anything, since the 3 of them had killed the Devouring God and killed their fellow spiritual weapon gods. And while he was alive, he fought so that no one could touch him. Then those 3 thugs decided not to wait, and simply killed him with their powerful techniques. When he saw his death again, he woke up abruptly. After all this time, he still has that nightmare. 6 gods died, and only 1 soul descended to Earth, for the sake of rebirth. Because he accidentally discovered a spiritual weapon, he became the only one who remembers the past. And he doesn't know exactly what's wrong with the other 5 gods, or whether the God of Devouring can become the same. Meanwhile, Imiana herself came to the academy and started knocking on Teacher Ji's door. The master opened the door, even though it was already dark outside. She came in and immediately started telling me that she had only been away for a month, and they had already accepted a new student. Imiana also decided to give a gift to Master Ji, namely the tea her father asked her to bring. Even knowing that the master doesn't accept gifts, she still asks to accept it. Ji thanked her for the gift, and asked her to tell her thank you to her father. He also asked what about the items he had asked her to find. Imiana had already looked at the lists of Yixiangju's goods from the past years and didn't find the items mentioned. Then Ji speculated in his mind that the spiritual tools of the gods, which they had scattered over the earth, had been lost in the wilderness. However, Xianju also added that she had one artifact. Although it was low level, it was the most similar to what the master had described to her. It was of course about the artifact she had given to Bisa. Then Ji asked where it was now. Xianju didn't want to upset the master, but she still said that she gave it to her friend. The appearance of that artifact is completely different. It's probably not what he's looking for. Ji was a little frustrated and wanted to believe that this wasn't what he needed. But still Ji asked her to come back and rest. Tomorrow he would introduce her to her younger brother. Yixiangyu was not very happy because as her younger brother, he should take the initiative to meet her. She doesn't want to go to him herself, but she was also a bit frustrated and angry because she had to try her best to get the master to accept her as an apprentice. And this new apprentice was accepted by the master himself. She couldn't believe that he was so much more talented than her. She then approached the master and asked very much to pass her words to her younger brother. Meanwhile, BS was eating pizza, of course. Unexpectedly, Pizza Hut even has restaurants in the Spirit Eater Academy, and their food is really good. Going to his house, he noticed some silhouette that was jumping very fast on the roofs of the building. Baisa was of course interested and went after her. He stealthily went behind her back and praised her for her bravery that someone dared to sneak into the Spirit Eater Academy. She immediately jumped up and threw several kunai at him. Bisa activated his technique and easily repelled her attack. The one in turn started to run away, as she didn't want any trouble, and she saw enough of his opponent's strength in front of her. Bisa was able to still remove her cloak at the last moment. Taking off his cloak, Bisa somehow thought it was a boy, and he was surprised at how handsome he was. But it was actually a girl. She, in turn, fell into the trap. And then a huge beam appeared right in the middle of the academy, and it was an array. Meanwhile, Ji looked out the window and assumed that someone had broken into the academy. Bisa immediately realized that this was the Blazing Heaven array set up in the academy, so he summed up that something fishy was going on here. This array was quite difficult for him. Anyone who entered the array would be imprisoned in a cage of spiritual power. The prisoner would be unable to move, and if they moved, they would be burned alive. In the end, BS was able to get her out of there. Luckily, she just passed out. Meanwhile, the guards were already looking for the person who had infiltrated the academy and gotten into the array, but they couldn't find anyone. The guards decided to search the place, as this man must be hiding somewhere nearby, as he was most likely badly hurt by the array. After some time, they still could not find the man. The guards were even beginning to think this stranger had grown wings. But still, after a few more minutes, the guards heard some strange noises around the corner and decided to check it out. Bisa realized that they had most likely been discovered, and something had to be done. In doing so, he pressed this girl close to him to get through the narrower gorge. It wasn't until he accidentally grabbed her breasts that he realized it was a girl, not a guy. She woke up at that moment and wanted to start screaming because she was being groped by Bisa. Toth immediately started gagging her and asked her to be quiet. He ordered her to listen to him if she wanted to survive. At the same time, they heard and closer the guards talking. BS hasn't done this in a while. But today, he decided to put on a show for everyone, so he decided to go over the top to get in their backs. This girl was shocked at how fast he was. She didn't even know who it was. Bisa started walking the streets looking for some Bai Xiaoyu. The guards immediately caught him as they suspected him of something wrong. Bisa began to explain to them that he was just looking for his friend who had gotten lost. After which, Bai Xiaoyu, who was covered in clothes made of holes and burns, came out from around the corner. Bisa immediately ran up to her and in front of everyone started asking her what happened to her clothes and who attacked her. Bai Xiaoyu began to recount that when she ran into that courtyard to hide from him, suddenly several dark shadows flew through the sky, followed by dazzling flashes of light, and then she didn't remember what happened. Bisa put his arm around her and began to calm her down and promised to take her to a master who would help her. The head guard approached them and asked them to stop this spectacle, for he had never seen the two of them at the academy. Bisa began to defend his rules and asked him how he dared to raise his voice at him. After all, he was Master Shuangji's disciple. This head guard had never heard in regards to a new personal disciple. But another guard came up to him and explained that he had heard that teacher Shuangji himself had specifically come down from the mountain today to accept someone as a personal disciple. He also told the boss that it looked like an ordinary date and that it looked like the real intruder had escaped. At the same time, everyone knew that the teacher, Shuangji, protected his students. If they offended him, they would not feel bad for sure. Meanwhile, Bisa stood aside with Bai Xiaoyu and asked how she was feeling and cared for her a lot in front of the others. But in fact, he was playing his role like this. So the head guard decided that they didn't need the trouble. Especially it looked like just a normal date, so they just let it pass. Bisa put his arm around her and headed out. Whatever the reason, trespassing is a serious offense, and he should report it to the proper authorities. While walking through the park, Bisa asked her that, since she was already a student of the Spirit Eater Academy, she should have known that there was a forbidden place there. Bai Xiaoyu explained that although the place was unremarkable, it was where the greatest secret of the Spirit Eater Academy was kept. A second later, Bai Xiaoyu pulled out her dagger and waved it behind Bisa's back. Bai Xiaoyu wanted to attack Bisa, but the latter had a good reaction and repelled her blade. His shield bounced off her like a soccer ball. He was so nice to her and even saved her life, but she still wants to kill him. Bai Xiaoyu explained her action very simply. He humiliated her, and everyone who humiliated her is already dead. Now she is injured, but she will take revenge on him someday. Bisa stood perplexed by this very restless and energetic girl, after which they parted ways. He was helped quite a bit by the artifact Imiana gave him, so he wanted to meet her someday to thank her properly, when suddenly he heard someone calling him. It was Xuanji himself who asked where he had been missing. Bisa decided to make up a real story for me, and said in an uncertain voice that he had gone out to eat and wanted to return, but had gotten lost. Xuanji decided to explain to Bisa that the Spirit Eater Academy had many secrets. If he didn't want to get into a bloodbath, it was better not to delve into them. With that, he handed him a letter. Bisa took the letter and asked who it was from. Xuanji told him that it was a letter from his older sister. She wanted to see him tomorrow. Bisa was puzzled that he now had an older sister. Opening the letter, he saw a map. It also had a note and a clue on it. As soon as the sun rises, you will have to come to these mountains. Your sister will be waiting for you at the appointed place. Looking at this map, all he could say was that he would have to pass several mountains. He wondered what exactly his sister wanted from him, forcing him to go this far. Xuanji didn't ask his elder sister what she wanted him to do. However, he did say a few words to him. Be careful. BC had a very strange feeling about this card, but still the next day he went to that point. It took him a long time, but still he reached this point. When he got there, he didn't notice anything strange. He was still afraid that she had some plans for him, and he was careful of his surroundings. But none of that mattered, because first she had to be found, and then everything else. He didn't stand on ceremony and started right into those woods and called out to her. His scream could be heard as far away as the forest. The screams even reached one of the caves, which had a lot of scary and evil monsters. A bunch of gorillas started running out of there looking for that nasty sound to drown it out forever. Imiana, meanwhile, was hiding near this cave. She just couldn't hold back her laughter, since you'd have to be completely crazy to scream in the gray-haired gorilla territory. But if he wanted to be her little brother, he'd have to pass her exam. An adult gray-haired gorilla is equal in strength to a level 10 spirit master. Although they won't kill him, it's enough to scare him. But still, don't get too carried away. As suddenly she noticed some strange glint in that cave. Meanwhile, Bisa could only see a crowd of angry gray-haired gorillas in front of him, who wanted to just tear him apart. It also came to him that the scary sister just wanted to make him fight those gorillas. He decided not to bother and use a mass-produced technique. Let them sleep rather than be killed. Imiana, meanwhile, went to this cave to collect crystals. She didn't even know that gray-haired gorillas had such items. There were a lot of blood crystals. They could be used to forge good spiritual weapons and more. But her joyous mood was gone in a second. She saw a huge golden-haired mountain gorilla in front of her. Its strength was comparable to a level 30 spiritual master. Bisei, meanwhile, had already put all the gorillas to sleep. The effect of the lightning chain attack was surprisingly good. He was able to knock everyone out with it without any problems. And then he went to the cave to finally settle accounts with her new, hospitable older sister. Suddenly he heard loud female screams, and after that, a powerful roar sounded, and one could hear someone breaking trees with great speed. Turning a little to the right, he saw a huge gorilla monster, and an older sister calling out at the top of her voice for help from her little brother. Imiana was shocked that he was able to get rid of all the gray-haired gorillas and remain unharmed. As he got closer, this guy became more and more recognizable, and then they met each other's eyes and immediately remembered each other. Bisa was a little surprised after all, how the world was so small that the two of them had met again. Imiana interrupted him, for they had no time to remember the past, for there was a huge gorilla behind them that wanted to trample them. She was very angry, and had already picked up a stone to throw at them and crush them like bugs. Bisa was shocked that she had brought a huge, golden-haired gorilla to check on him. Imiana immediately started making excuses and saying that it wasn't her doing at all. Bisa realized he needed to take matters into his own hands and ordered her to stick behind him. The golden-haired gorilla's strength would bypass 100 gray-haired gorillas. With his current cultivation, he wouldn't be able to defeat him. It was the gorilla who decided not to wait and threw a bunch of rocks at them. Bisa thought of nothing better than to take Imiana in his arms and run away from the pile of rocks. Once they landed on the ground, they were able to get back from the gorilla attack. But a split second later, they heard a cracking sound beneath them. They jumped to the edge of the cliff, and the ground just collapsed beneath them. They flew into the cliff, and a pile of red crystals with them. Bisa immediately tried to catch Imiana in flight, but a little short on time, and they both fell into the water. Imiana began to slowly sink to the bottom. But still, Bisa got a glimpse of her and managed to grab her hand. Taking her fully in his arms, he began to slowly swim outside with her. The current was too strong, and Bisa ordered to hold on to it tighter. This current led them right into some other cave. Bisa just couldn't let them get into that cave and grab the shore. Then they got out, and Bisa suggested that they hide there and wait for the gorilla to leave. Imiana immediately started screaming as she lost her blood crystals that she had spent so long collecting in this fucking cave. She was very angry as she had taken such a risk for the reward but was left without it. Bisa didn't understand why this was all for him. After coming a little way ahead, they came to some beautiful place where there were many animals. Imiana immediately began to guess that they had entered the Chanlin cave. It turned out that in addition to the main entrance to the academy, there was another one through the underground rivers. Bisa immediately thought of this cave, as Master Ji himself had spoken about it. After which, Bisa went to the center of this cave. Imiana immediately started shouting to him that Chanlin was the center of the academy. He wouldn't be able to enter here without permission, and ordered him not to go any further. Bisa gave her a strange look and only laughed at her. He explained that he was obviously not going to get out of here through that river. There was nothing left to do but to go along with him. On the way, Bisa told him that the master had promised him that he would take him there to search for a contract spirit animal, so he decided to take the opportunity to find a suitable animal. Imiana was pissed off by all this and told him not to brag about it, as Chanlin's spirit beasts and caves were at least 5th yellow level and above. The deeper he went, the stronger the beasts would be. It would be impossible for him to catch the spirit beasts here with his current basic cultivation, just like her. Bisa gave her a strange look when he heard about the yellow level, since he obviously didn't know that the mortal realm had a classification of spirit beasts. Imiana was shocked that this place didn't even know about the levels of spirit beasts, so she decided to tell him that from top to bottom there are 4 spiritual realms. They are the heavenly realm, the earthly realm, the mysterious realm, and the yellow realm, each consisting of 9 stages. And also, all spirit beasts are divided into 10 attributes. They are gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, wind, thunder, ice, light, and darkness. The different attributes can complement each other or vice versa depending on the combination. Bisa all of course understood, but decided to ask how she thought the level of beast behind her was. She slowly turned around and started to get a little nervous. She saw in front of her a huge anaconda giant of the yellow realm, as high as level 6. Bai Xiaoyu, meanwhile, came to her teacher. She said that she didn't have the strength to break into the secret room, so she asked the master to punish her as severely as possible. The master was very angry with her because he told her to wait patiently for the perfect moment. She had been in a hurry and had almost thwarted his splendid plan. But still, he decided to give her a chance to redeem herself. She, of course, agreed to this last chance. Master said that the Zhenyu Palace needed a batch of high-level spirit beasts, and just like that, the Spirit Eater Academy had excellent specimens. She must immediately find out the entire situation of the spirit beasts in Chanlin Cave. Bai Xiaoyu understood the task and promised that she would do her best for her beloved lord, except she didn't really understand how to get into this Chanlin Cave. She had heard that it was the holy ground of the Spirit Eater Academy, and not everyone could enter. At this time, Bisa and Imiana were actively trying to dodge the Anaconda's attack. Baiwa even managed to counterattack the snake techniques, but he was unable to harm it in any way. Although it was a 6th yellow-level giant anaconda, but its armor was so strong that even Bisa couldn't penetrate it with his techniques. It was all strange to Bishi. He noticed how this anaconda was very cunning and intelligent. Even started to think maybe it was the effect of Chanlin Cave. However, he had to figure out a way to deal with it first, so as not to attract the attention of stronger spirit beasts. Bisa came up with a simple and ingenious plan, and the simpler, the more reliable. He turned to Imiana and asked her to divert the Anaconda's attention, as he needed some time. Oni has gotten it into her head that she is the big sister to Bisei, so she must protect her little brother. To do so, she summoned her spiritual butterfly and activated the technique Six-Winged Butterfly Mind Nebula. It clouded the mind of this Anaconda and she had a good opportunity to attack it, after which her butterfly shot a bunch of fireballs at this Anaconda. But it was like a tickle to her. Imiana didn't even scratch this Anaconda's armor. Bisa saw her trying to attack the Anaconda and said that it was completely useless. As long as her spiritual armor was active, no attack would work. And if they wanted to defeat this snake, they had to block its spiritual energy flows first. So he activated the spirit-binding chain technique. This was the first time Imiana had seen such a technique and asked what it even was. Bisa didn't bother to explain anything and just shouted, "Exterminate." This Anaconda was just ripped into a bunch of little pieces. From the cold, her body shattered and instantly turned into ice. Even Imiana was almost scratched from the pile of shards that flew towards her. If she fought another beast, if she lost, she would freeze it with her body. This Anaconda was a truly terrifying opponent. Just as suddenly, Bisa noticed some strange movement within that ice. A small spirit beast emerged from the Anaconda's corpse. Imiana assumed that it must be the cub of another spirit beast. Most likely its parents were killed by the Anaconda. It didn't freeze in this corpse, meaning that its attribute was fire. Bisa looked a little closer and saw its eyebrows were like clouds, its eyes like blue sky, and its mouth was graceful. It could swallow mountains and rivers with it. So he thought it was Tungmol Shengchu from the ancient legends. According to legend, in a battle between gods and demons, Tungmol Shengchu absorbed 100,000 demons in one volley, and so the gods couldn't decide who won. Although it was only a cub now, it was the perfect spirit animal for him to help him become many times stronger. As a friend shouted in his back, someone shouted, "Who dared to enter Canlin Cave?" It was an old acquaintance of Bisa, whom he had robbed and beaten. With him was a level 25 third-year disciple Zhang Wanli. He was the vice president of the Spirit Eaters Academy's High Society. Also with him was second-year student Bai Xiangshui, level 17, a member of the Spirit Eater Academy's High Society. Well, there was another level 18 second-year student Zhang Feng, who was a member of the Spirit Academy's High Society. Bisa decided not to be aggressive, and politely replied that he was just looking for a way out of Canlin Cave. For this kid, this was a good opportunity to teach him a lesson for last time. That time he escaped him, but this time he won't escape and die. Zhuan told everyone else that he had met Bisu on the way here, and he had sneakily poisoned him. Zhang Wanli told him not to worry, as he would now completely sort himself out. The children of wealthy families in the academy have created a high society, and they are all part of it. Bisa didn't quite understand them, for they tried to exclude low-level students like him, and still such trash still studied at the academy. But most of all, he didn't understand the connection between the high society and the delicatessen club. After which, Zhang Wanli approached them and asked them what his name was and what course he was from. Imiana interrupted him and ordered him to open his eyes wide and look carefully at who was standing in front of him, and how dare he yell at them at all. She also added that this was her new little brother, and he shouldn't go up against the two of them. Zhang Wanli stated about how Xiao Churan had mentioned that there was a rookie that Shuangji had accepted even though he didn't have a spirit beast. Tungmol Shengchu, meanwhile, began to quietly move in with BZ, and Imiana was still very angry, for how dare he call her master by his name. The academy's rules didn't allow him to say such a thing. Tungmol Shengchu willingly jumped on BC's arm. When Jiang Wanli saw Tungmol Shengchu, he was a bit surprised as he had never seen such beasts before. Zhuan explained to him that at first glance it looked like an ordinary one, but since it was rare, it could be used for pills. Bisa in turn took his finger and bit down on it until it bled. He held his finger up to Tungmol Sheng and offered to be his spirit beast and make a contract. Imiana was surprised that this jerk had chosen this beast as a spirit beast. She had already realized that this one didn't know the importance of choosing a spirit beast for spirit eaters. The two laughed at BZ's choice, as they thought that he was going to seek a strong spirit beast and escape from them, but he chose some unknown beast that wasn't even old enough to fight yet. Bisa touched Tungmol Sheng with his blood-covered finger, thus making a contract with him. He actually had to use spiritual power to make the contract. This only proved that Tungmol Shengchu was truly an amazing beast. Bai Shengshui decided to show this fool what a true spirit beast was and summoned his own. He summoned a flame hyena, Yellow Realm level 7. That spirit beast flew at Bisu and Imiana with great speed. But Bisa had time to activate a defense technique and repelled the attack. Zhang Wanli started laughing with him and also said that in this cave, no one would know that he was dead. He was amused that the one dared to threaten him with his master. A laugh indeed. Bisa also laughed at them for daring to attack them in Qianlin Cave. So they are indeed the realest scum. Tungmul Shengchu, meanwhile, hid in BC's clothes and only occasionally peeked out with his small head. Zhang Wanli was shocked how Bisa was able to repel the attack. Bai Shengshui already wanted to attack him once more and began to prepare for his next attack. Except that Bisa interrupted him and warned him that there would be no second time. He then flew at him with his equipment at high speed. But BS was quickly becoming. In front of him, a dark mantis, Yellow Realm, level 7, jumped out. Zhang Wanli had instructed his guys to attack him together. This way, he clearly wouldn't be able to withstand such an onslaught. Imiana was shocked at what scoundrels they really were, attacking one with two of them. They had lost their pride. In that case, she decided not to stand aside and join the battle. Bisa dodged the mantis's attacks and asked Imiana not to interfere in their fight. While Bisa was trying to fight the praying mantis, his spirit beast Tunmul Shenshu fell out of his clothes. And at that moment, a huge fireball flew at him. Since Tunmul Shenshu is now Bisa's partner, he vowed that he would not let him harm him. Then there was a huge explosion, and Bisa was right in the center of that explosion. Imiana immediately began to worry about Bisa as the explosion was very powerful. Meanwhile, the guys were laughing at this jerk who decided to defend himself with his body against the attack of a 7-level spirit beast. They even thought that his corpse had turned into ashes. But of course, Bisa was not a miss and used his beast's huge defense technique, thus protecting himself and him. The boys didn't understand how the one had even managed to herald a barrier around him in such a small period of time. Wanli guessed that it was that little beast. But they didn't quite understand, as such a barrier could be created by a spiritual beast of at least the 9th level of the Yellow Realm. Imiana even exhaled with peace of mind when she saw him alive. She was so worried about him, and he was able to fend off the attack. If he had died, she wouldn't know how to inform the master. After which, the guys ordered their spirit beasts to finally finish off Bisa, and his spirit beast was captured. Tunmul Shenshu didn't just observe and activated his technique. With one technique, he wiped them to ashes. No one understood what kind of spiritual beast of the Yellow Realm this was. And next, Bisa asked them if they had any more tricks left, as he was already bored playing with them. Zhang Wanli recognized that although he was new, he still had the audacity to be so rude to them. Therefore, he decided to teach him a lesson while starting to gather chakra in his hand. Bisa noticed that he had a very dense aura. Imiana said that Zhang Wanli's refinement had reached level 25, which was quite a lot. Bisa remembered the wisdom when encountering a beast on a narrow path. One must not show cowardice. Therefore, he decided not to show cowardice and also began to gather chakra in his hand. And then their forces came together in a long-range battle. They met with chakra, and the impact was so strong that a flash and a strong wind were created. Zhang Wanli at that moment only wanted to tear him into small pieces and as fast as possible, while believing in his own strength and knowing that he was stronger. Bisa decided not to answer him anything, but instead to concentrate on confronting the chakras. Imiana watched all this and didn't understand. She knew that Bisa's cultivation level was around 15, and he still managed to somehow fight on equal footing with Zhang Wanli. Bisa conceitedly knew that Tunmul Shenshu could increase his strength, but he didn't know that it was possible to increase his strength that much. After a few seconds, Zhang Wanli began to notice that Bisa was getting stronger and stronger. He didn't realize where the catch was, as he himself was already starting to lose a little bit of strength. Then the other guys decided to help and confront him together. Imiana certainly didn't want to just stand by and watch his little brother get destroyed. So I too decided to join the battle and help my brother. And at one point, the ground underneath BS and Imiana just started to crack. The two of them had a very strange sense of déjà vu at that moment. And as you'd expect, a second later, there was an explosion. Bisa, along with her beast and Imiana, began to quickly fall into the abyss along with the rocks. None of the guys expected this development. Their joint attack was able to affect the environment. There are many karst caves in Qianlin Cave. Most likely they fell into one of them. Therefore, they must have already died under the rubble. At the same time, the crack in the ground grew larger and larger, so they started running away from there as fast as they could so they wouldn't get there and die. Meanwhile, Bisa and Imiana survived, but were in total darkness and couldn't find each other in the dark for a while. Imiana was screaming so hard in search of Bisei that he couldn't help himself, and still lit up the cave with the technique to calm her down. The two of them had been very lucky. Even though they had fallen into a cave again, they were still alive. Imiana didn't understand what was good here. After all, even if they had given out, they were still stuck in this trap, and all they had to do was wait to die. Bisa didn't do much figuring, and judging from the falling time, they were falling at least 30 meters. And if they wanted to get out, they would need to have at least a level 25 improvement base. Even if he cultivated non-stop, it would take at least a year. Suddenly, Tunmol Shinchu himself jumped out of the pile of small stones. Imiana praised him for not running away from them, even though he had the opportunity to do so. Then Bisa finally realized that this Tunmol Shinchu recognized him as the master. And he also asked him for his master's help. Tunmol Shinchu just took it and turned into a token. After thinking for a while, Bisa realized that Tunmol Shinchu could also absorb heaven and earth. If he combined it with the heaven and earth absorption technique, there was a chance of getting out of this cave. So he stepped back a bit and began to meditate. Imiana furiously started yelling at him. How could he even have the desire to cultivate in such a horrible and dark place? And after a few seconds, she noticed that the natural energy around her was beginning to be absorbed by something. And then she realized that it was Bisa's handiwork, and was very surprised, as it is not given to everyone. Only true masters can absorb natural energy. With that belt, Jiang and the rest of the guys finally walked out of this cave. The vice dean of the Spirit Eaters Academy met him on the way out. The dean of Chixiao Academy, Chen Kaiyu. He asked Wanli what happened there. Zhang Wanli began to tell him that today while on patrol, they noticed two disciples sneaking into the cave. Chen Kaiyu questioned him about whether their sect members had definitely sneaked into Qianlin Cave. Zhang Wanli confirmed his words, and added that they were very similar to teacher Ji Shuang's personal disciples. He had once asked teacher Jia Shuang himself about them. To Chen Kaiyu, this was outrageous, and he decided to go to Ji Shuang to sort things out. Jiang Wanli was very excited and in anticipation as he hadn't been able to pick on Ji Shuang before, and now it could be seen how the latter would explain himself for his students. Meanwhile, Ji Shuang himself was sitting in his home meditating. Suddenly, he heard a knock on the door. Ji Shuang, although he was meditating, he still allowed him to enter. It was Long, who was urgently looking for Bisa, and decided to ask the teacher where he was. Ji Shuang was surprised, since he didn't pay attention yesterday, but she turns out to be a Yuling keeper. She introduced herself as a second-year student. Long Xia is the captain of the Yuling Guardians, and she also said that they were ordered from above to investigate last night's trespassing in the forbidden area of the academy. According to the guards, they had noticed a suspicious girl in that area last night, but she had been led away by Bisa. The Guardians of Yuling are responsible for guarding the academy and are divided into 4 divisions: Qinglong, Baihu, Suzaku, and Xuanwu. All members of the Guardians are the elite of the academy, and only third-year students can become captain. So if she stands out too much, she will attract unnecessary attention from people who will want to know her secrets. Long tensed up a bit, and asked what he meant since she didn't understand anything. Though in her head she was shocked how he knew her real identity. Ji Shuang decided to change the subject, and said that Bisa had gone somewhere with his older sister, but where exactly he didn't know. Just as suddenly, they from the street heard Ji Shuang calling out to someone with a very fierce shout. It was Chen Kaiyu who started shouting about his disciple's horrible deed. Ji Shuang, with a calm head and hot tea in his hands, asked the vice dean what happened, and why he went to his house so fiercely. Zhang Wanli jumped into the conversation and asked him if he knew where his personal disciples were. Ji Shuang didn't understand what was going on today at all, for they were also looking for Bisa. That one even thought that this guy had become too popular. Long immediately turned to Zhang Wanli and asked where Bisa was, as she just needed to ask him something personal. A wry smile appeared on Zhang Wanli's face, and he also decided to tell them that they would no longer be able to talk to him most likely. Bisa and Imiana Yixianju had secretly infiltrated Qianlin Cave. After angering the high-ranked beast, they fought a battle that ended up killing them both under the rubble in the cave. Long and Ji Shuang simply froze at this information, as this was a turn of events they clearly didn't expect to hear. Chen Kaiyu decided to jump into the conversation, and made Ji Shuang blame Ji Shuang for this situation. If he hadn't poked his students, they would have avoided this situation. Ji Shuang decided to put them in their place, and asked how they got into Qianliang Cave, and where the guards even stood, since they were not supposed to let them through. Chen Kaiyu was not confused and said that those two had used his name and infiltrated the place. Everyone accepts one disciple each, but he had two, so they were able to force those who denied it. Zhang Wanli decided to add oil to the fire and started shouting that such a teacher should leave the Soul Eater Academy. The crowd of guards who were standing behind him also decided to support Zhang Wanli and started protesting. The other students of the academy began to whisper amongst themselves and wonder what was going on in that shouting crowd. There were even rumors that Jianlin Cave had collapsed, and it was teacher Ji Shuang's personal disciples who were to blame. Long noticed that there were more and more spectators, so she ordered her guys to protect teacher Ji, and they would also wait for the dean's orders. Just as suddenly, everyone saw something very fast rushing in front of them. It was Bisa with Imiana and of course Tunmul Shenchu. Bisa saw a bunch of people and assumed they were having a meeting. Zhang Wanli simply couldn't believe that this bastard was alive since he had seen him fall into the gorge with his own eyes. Bisa saw the moment and decided to parrot Zhang Wanli. He even fell to the floor and started to supposedly beg for mercy from the ghost. Jishuang noticed that he had broken through to level 25 in half a day, which was astonishing. And he was also accompanied by the rarest spiritual beast, Shanghai Pixiu. He then realized how he was able to break through to a higher level so quickly. Imiana also decided to scare Zhang Wanli, and asked him why he thought they were ghosts, and gave everyone a hint that he was the one who did something wrong. Zhang Wanli started saying that it was all nonsense, and that they were the ones who destroyed Chanlin Cave. He had even seen it with his own eyes, and wasn't going to deny it. Bisa decided to add, apparently it was young Master Jiang who messed with the Delicacy Club. And when they encountered each other in the cave, those were killing beasts and wreaking havoc. All the people who were around were surprised that brother Jiang Wanli was indeed in cahoots with the Delicacy Club. Zhang Wanli interrupted him and started saying that he was talking nonsense. For how could he be in cahoots if he asked him for help because he didn't want to give him the spirit beast? Zhang Wanli quickly fell silent as he realized that he had said a complete stupid thing since everyone else had now found out the truth. After which Bisa added that he attacked them and destroyed Chanlin Cave. This guy was so stupid even though he looked cunning. Chen Kaiyu couldn't believe that it was Zhang Wanli himself. He would never be able to think of him and finish him off. This all really pissed Zhang Wanli off and he decided to finish him off right there until there was no evidence. Zhang Wanli didn't understand how that bastard Bisa dared to vilify him. So he decided to teach him a lesson. They started yelling at him to stop, but he didn't hear them and activated his electric palm technique. Long realized that Bisa might actually die and ordered her own to protect him. Electric palm, this is Zhang Wanli's main technique. Bisa's improvement level isn't that high. If it hits him, he would definitely die. Bisa in turn stood still and didn't even try to use any technique. It was only at the end that he picked it up and stopped it with just one hand. Everyone was amazed at Bisa's skill since he was able to stop him with one hand. Bisa only squeezed his hand tighter and only said that he was a complete fool. And then with his other hand, he punched him in the stomach with all his might. From such a blow, Zhang Wanli even started spitting blood. That was how strong Bisa's punch was. Ji Shuang stopped Bisa and said that Suzuki, that is the long guys, would handle it. Ji was surprised that his disciple was hiding many secrets from him. Long ordered Suzaku to herd Zhang Wanli and investigate. Even though she hadn't seen him for only a few days, he had already broken through to level 25. Either they're all bad or this guy's too talented. Then Long approached Bisa and said that they would interrogate him for the time being, and then she wanted to ask Bisa personally for the details of last night. Meanwhile, Chen Kaiyu turned around with his guys and said that he had a lot of unfinished business left. Ji Shuang started to stop them, as he would like to have a cup of tea with him some more. Bisa was finally already exhaling as it was all over. Imiana bent over to him, who told him not to relax so much, and further asked to look at the master's face. One could clearly see on Ji Shuang's face that he was clearly dissatisfied with something. Afterward, the three of them moved around the table to drink tea and discuss the day. They were all silent, and Imiana decided to be the first to start the conversation, and admitted that she was wrong, and promised not to do it again. From the surprise of such a statement, Ji Shuang even choked on his tea. Ji Shuang asked them if they even knew how much trouble they had caused. But even so, she and Bisa are sitting quietly drinking tea. Imiana started to make excuses, and said that they were just tired from the road, and besides, they had known each other for a long time. Bisa decided to keep the conversation going, and wanted to say that she almost became his future wife. But Imiana was quick to react and shut his mouth, preventing him from speaking the rest of the way. Ji Shuang began to guess and asked why she wouldn't let him finish, a wry smile on his face. Imiana didn't understand when this master had become such a gossip enthusiast. Bisa only laughed and said that there was nothing wrong with that. At the same time, he was amazed at her, for she had been so fierce in battle, and now she was blushing so sweetly. Looking at this couple, Ji Shuang somehow felt superfluous. Suddenly, someone knocked on their door and walked in. It was Seron who personally came to see Bisa. Bisa was very happy to see him, so he asked the master to let him go, as he had important business with his brother Serong. Ji Shuang understood the situation and let him go. Bisa was so happy to see him again that he had a couple of questions for him. Bisadaje offered to talk about it over lunch, on him. That night they went to a restaurant, and BS of course ordered 2 specialty pizzas to be made for him. Seron was surprised that his brother had only joined the academy 2 days ago, and already had such a deep knowledge of the food here. Bisa thanked him for the compliment and decided to finally get to the point, and there was something he wanted to know about. He had seen the man using anabiosis spells at his house. He wondered who had trained him to do it. Seron didn't want to hide anything from his brother, and told him how he had found knowledge of this art in one of the abandoned courtyards of the academy. He practiced it from time to time. Seron didn't understand why he remembered the technique, and thought that he used it in some wrong way. Bisa explained that it was very important to him. It's an art. So he started to clarify where that abandoned courtyard was, and if he could even take him there. Bisa assumed the person who had attacked him back then was hiding in the Spirit Eater Academy. He just needed to test this theory. Meanwhile, Jiang Wanli headed to the headquarters of the High Society. There he came to Qin Wuliang, the president of the High Society, and reported that he could not get rid of Bisei. Qin Wuliang was furious as their society had lost their face in front of the entire academy. Xian jumped into the conversation and added that this Bisa was not only hindering him, so they should all get rid of him altogether once and for all. However, that wasn't why he had come this time. He asked Jiang Wanli if he had already discovered the imperial princess. Jiang Wanli of course still did, for he had provided too little information about her. There are over 1,000 students in the academy, and it's not easy to find the princess hiding among them, and he also asked Mr. Xian to get the information he needed, directly from the archives in the academy. Except then there was a problem. Teacher Shuangji, who would obviously not let it be done. The president asked how he wanted to get rid of Teacher Shuangji. Then Baoxian came into the game and claimed another way. Baoxian began to say that he could get rid of not only Shuangji, but also his disciple Bisa. He would only need a little time to do so. Meanwhile, Bisa went with Seron to that very courtyard. On the way there, Bisa started sneezing heavily. He knew of many of his enemies and thought he was simply cursed. After a while, they came to some old and elderly building where Seron found the records of the technique. Bisa didn't understand how the academy could have such abandoned places. Seron told him that 6 months ago, the students lived here, but some strange and mythical things started happening, so they left the place. And before they left, they made such chaos here, as if there had been a bunch of battles inside this building. Bisa didn't know what he meant by strange things. Seron couldn't fully answer this question, as the academy refused to give details about the incident. But there was one thing he did know. At least 10 students have gone missing here in all that time. No bodies, no footprints, nothing's been found. He was very much interested in the case, and so he visited the place. But apart from the record, he found nothing. Upon entering this house, Bisa noticed the traces of a magic circle, which was most likely drawn by the Xuanjian dragon bone. In this room, a magical circle had been secretly activated, devouring everything around it. It's most likely what consumed those students. But there's a question of who did it. Bisa only guessed that there was also a magic circle somewhere in the academy. Just as suddenly, Bisa and Seron saw some fast and black silhouette outside the window, which swept under the windows of this building. Bisa decided to deal with it, and first, in a nice way, asked who was there. It was the same Bai Xiaoyu who started running away and jumping over the fence as she was found. Bisa and Seron immediately ran out into the courtyard and decided to grab her, but in doing so, Bisa asked to try not to kill her. Bisa caught up with her after all, and he managed to grab her. He was shocked that it was the same Bai Xiaoyu again. While Bisa was puzzled, Bai Xiaoyu meanwhile managed to get out of his arms. Then she started to run away. BS finally decided to ask her who she really was and why she was following him. Bai Xiaoyu didn't know what he was talking about since she wasn't following him, and she was also a student of the academy and was just passing by here. At the same time, while she was saying that, her cursed seal activated. Bisa immediately noticed the seal of the death curse on her neck. Bisa immediately called her a fool for being out of her mind for running around with a death seal. So he asked her to stop, and then he could help her temporarily stabilize her seal. She decided to trust BC after all, and made herself comfortable. When Bisa started to stabilize this seal, he realized that there was also dark energy in this seal. This meant that it would be much heavier than he expected. She was in pain while stabilizing the seal, but then she felt much better. Although she called herself an ordinary student, she was wearing a death curse. So Bisa decided to ask her why she was following him. At the same time, he warned her that if she didn't tell, he would be forced to report her to the academy. Bai Xiaoyu realized that she simply had no choice and told him that she was following him on master's orders. He told her to find the secret passage to Qianlin Cave. Luckily, he left her alive, and if she completes this task, she can redeem herself to him and save herself. From all this, Bisa only realized that her master was some kind of very evil fiend and assumed she was from the delicatessen club. Except that Bai Xiaoyu didn't know what a delicacy club was when she heard those words from him. But she didn't care either way, and reported that she was from Zhengyu Palace. Bai Xiaoyu decided to elaborate more about Zhengyu Palace. It is the main organization of assassins on the mainland. They all complete missions perfectly and without mistakes. Although she is an inferior member of the palace master cares for her and entrusts her with missions, so she can't let him down. When Bisa heard how much the master cared for her, he reminded her that the master had put a death curse on her, and was using her as an expendable tool. This really pissed off Bai Xiaoyu, and she ordered him to shut up. She believed the one had this attitude because only men could be a member of the palace. He had already made an exception for her, and there was no way she would let him slander the master. After saying that, BZ now understood why she was so masculine and why she could be easily confused with the male gender. But still, this deadly curse is extremely dangerous. Even if she is given a medicine to ease it, it will still spread through her body, and one day it will reach her heart. Then even the gods won't be able to save her. She just stopped talking and didn't bother to answer anything, and just bounced out of there. Finally, he asked to at least say his real name, because it was not the first time they had seen each other, but they had never met. She paused, thought for a moment, and decided to say her real name after all. Feng Weixia. Bisa also introduced himself to her, and promised in case the seal activated again, he would be able to help her. She just needed to find him, and then he would save her. At this time, Serong just walked over. Bisa decided not to give Feng Weixia away, and only said that it was most likely a wildcat. He decided to change the subject about how he heard that the vanilla shrimp at the pizza place was delicious, so he invited him there, and was even willing to treat him. The next day, Bisa, Imiyana, and the teacher, Shuangji, gathered around the table. The teacher noticed that the two of them had been practicing very little lately, but now they had time to practice. He also decided to take care of Bisoi, because although he was a beginner, he had made a lot of noise around him in such a small period of time. Bisa didn't understand how he could now explore the delicacy club if teacher Shuangji was now going to follow him all the time. It was simply impossible would be. During the tea party, 3 subjects came to them, who reported that the elder of the disciplinary council asked to invite him and Bisu to their place. Bisa froze with a smart look and thought for a moment. Imiyana saw this and wondered if everything was even okay. The elder of the disciplinary council is responsible for enforcing the rules of the Spirit Eater Academy. If the rules are broken, the person is expelled from the academy permanently, with no possibility of reinstatement. After arriving there, the elder immediately recognized that he had a lot of courage. He then asked Shuangji how he dared to accept a disciple without a spirit beast, since it was a strict violation of the academy's rules. Shuangji decided to explain the situation, and told him that Bisa was an extremely talented person. And also, the dean had once told him about how it was not necessary to have a spirit beast when enrolling, and besides, he had contracted a spirit beast on the 2nd day after entering the academy. Qin Wuliang walked into the hall and immediately started laughing at teacher Shuangji, because he actually used the dean's words to justify himself. Afterwards, he personally went up to him and asked him why he had chosen Bisu out of all of them. He also asked him how he caught the spirit beast after entering the academy. Bisa looked at him and didn't understand who this arrogant bastard was. Imiyana shouted to him that he was the 3rd president of the high society, Qin Wuliang, and added that he was actually cunning and devious, so you should be very careful with him. And then Qin Wuliang himself announced to the whole hall that he had investigated the matter and had sent some of his men to Bisa's hometown, and it turned out that Bisa was the nephew of teacher Shuangji. This was reported to him in his hometown, after which he held out the letter and loudly asserted that Shuangji had accepted Bisu because of kinship ties. Therefore, both of them had violated many rules of the academy and should be severely punished. Bisa didn't realize what kind of nonsense he was talking about and only laughed at his proof. Imiana immediately noticed that it was very much like him, and even suggested that most likely in their evidence they had prepared false documents and more. In the meantime, the people started to talk about how it was true, and they started to get very angry. But that wasn't all. In addition, as soon as Bisa entered the academy, someone broke into the restricted area. And the guards confirmed that Bisa was there and released the female suspects. Qin Wuliang approached Bishi and asked him loudly who he had helped. Bisa, of course, didn't want to tell the truth and made up a story about how he dated that girl. But she didn't find him attractive enough and dumped him. He and her weren't that close, so he doesn't even know her name. Except that no one believed in Bizi's words. At this, Feng Weixia herself stood in the crowd, who was surprised with Bizi since, although he was in danger, he still didn't reveal her, and she was incredibly grateful to him. And further, the elders publicly announced the decision there. Bisa and Xuanji are sentenced to 10 days of imprisonment, and will also be expelled after the dean is notified. But still, Bisa asked them to take their time and reminded them that after all, he was accepted here because of his strength. And they, by the way, didn't even bother to look at it. Qin Wuliang laughed and asked what he wanted to show this trash. He didn't believe in him at all and saw him as nothing to himself. Bisa went to the elder and questioned the veracity of the evidence Qin Wuliang had provided. Fortunately, he had a great way to prove his innocence. He turned to Qin Wuliang and publicly challenged him. He was shocked by his statement, as he didn't expect such a brave shift from such a lowly person. Bisa just explained that she wanted to beat him and prove her innocence to everyone. All these crimes are just lies, and nothing more. Everyone nearby thought that Bisa had finally lost his mind, since he started proposing a battle with Qin Wuliang himself. After this meeting, Qin Wuliang returned to his high society hall. He was very funny about the whole situation. Since I've never seen such fools before. This Bisa really decided to fight him by signing his death warrant. Bao Xian started to support his master, and added that this bastard didn't even have a choice when the master himself cornered him. Zhang Wanli, on the other hand, thought differently. Bisa had scheduled the battle in 3 days, and Zhang Wanli suspected that he was preparing some kind of trap. Qin Wuliang laughed at this assumption. He wanted to show him how pathetic he was. Meanwhile, Bisa came home after the meeting and kept listening to the lecture on the way. But when he got home, he ordered delivery from his favorite pizza place and was very satisfied. At the same time, Imiana yelled at him almost the entire way, explaining that Qin Wuliang was as low as level 30, while his cultivation was 5 levels lower, and one just wondered what he was thinking when he challenged him. Bisa didn't understand why she was so worried about it. After all, even in the worst-case scenario, he would die, not her. And he assumed out loud that she loved him. She blushed and turned around, while ordering him not to talk such nonsense. Teacher Shuangji came into the conversation and gave advice not to underestimate Qin Wuliang, for he has the strength to cut iron with his bare hands. Also, his contracted beast is the Yellow Realm purple-winged dragon, which was very serious. Bisa asked not to worry about him, because he didn't care at all how strong he was. He wanted to think alone for a while and clear his head, so he decided to go for a walk. That being said, Bisa realized that he would most likely prepare some tricks for him, but it wasn't that scary. The most important thing was to find out if Qin Wuliang practiced dark magic. This battle will give him the opportunity to learn a lot of things he needs to know, but he needs to bridge the gap between them somehow. So he came to the conclusion that he needed to make pills. He came to some clearing where he gathered plants like lonjian, lori flower, cloud ginkgo, and many more. He had run by there yesterday and felt the aura of the place. He was very lucky that there was a medicinal herb garden there, and he wouldn't have to worry about materials. That made him very happy. He, of course, didn't know who the owner of this garden was, but now it was an emergency, and he decided to take some herbs. But after that, he would of course bring everything back. Suddenly, a black silhouette appeared behind Bishu's back. He walked up to BZ, and the latter was very frightened of him. He immediately realized that this old man was the owner of the garden. He did not understand how this old man could come so close to him without being seen. The old man reassured him, saying that he was not the owner of this garden. just tending it from time to time. He also asked him not to worry and allowed him to take any herbs he wanted. Bisa thanked him very much and promised him that as soon as he produced the pills, he would return everything he had taken. The old man was surprised that he was already an alchemist at such a young age, but Bisa claimed that he was just a little bit of an alchemist. At that, the old man noticed how all the herbs that he had gathered in the garden were the rarest of their kind. Few people knew about them. This only meant that he was a third-rank alchemist. But the old man had little faith in it, as he was too young to look at. And further, Bisa said that he had enough of these herbs as well, and he also wanted to ask him to convey his gratitude to the master of this place. The old man only smiled and promised to pass on the words, after which Bisa quickly ran to his home, while rejoicing that there would be so many good medicinal materials in this garden, and he would be able to earn a decent amount of money from it all. When Bisa ran away, the old man started to feel a little regret, since he had worked so long for decades and grown these herbs, and he was a little upset about it. As a friend, some subject came to him and addressed him as Dean. He told him that he should come back because he had a very important meeting coming up. The Dean took off his hat and went to this meeting. Meanwhile, Bisa had already reached his house. When he reached the house, he saw Seron and Long. Seron immediately approached him and began to talk him out of fighting Qin Wuliang, as the rumors of the fight had already spread throughout the academy. Every mouse knows about it. Seron was aware of the danger, and he wanted to help his friend to give up. Longxia also started saying that it was just suicide since there was a huge difference in levels between them, and also ordered him to quickly pack his things and run away from here. Bisa calmly went into his house and thanked them for their concern, but still asked them not to disturb him, as he himself knows and understands everything, and then slammed the door loudly in their faces. After laying out all the herbs in front of him, Bisa began to think about what kind of pill to make. He had too many recipes and it was hard to choose. Meanwhile, Feng Weixia herself had secretly sneaked into his room, who also started urging him not to fight Qin Wuliang to protect her. Bisa was surprised to see her again, especially in his house. Feng Weixia offered to turn her in and that way he would be released. Bisa was very angry at these words, as this was the third person who didn't believe in him at all. Everyone advised him to give up the battle, but Bisa didn't think so. 3 days later, a bunch of people gathered around the arena to watch the fight. No one believed in Bisu, and everyone was sure that Chen Wuliang would win. But before the fight, Imiana didn't know where Bisa had gone, even though she had looked for him all over the academy. Meanwhile, the dean was also eager to see the fight, as he was interested in freshman Baisoi. He didn't know how this storm would turn out, which made it even more interesting. Chen Wuliang was sitting near the arena under an umbrella held by 2 maidservants. He wondered why Bisa was delayed and kept wondering if he had run away or was hiding somewhere. Jiang Wanli already wanted to declare his master as the winner of BZ's technical defeat. Just as suddenly everyone saw a dark silhouette in the sky. It was Bisa who made a very impressive appearance in the arena. The dean immediately remembered this kid from his garden of useful plants. Jian Wanli immediately began to intimidate and humiliate him, as he wanted him to run away from that arena out of fear. Qin Wuliang slowly started to get up from his chair, and asked if he had taken any forbidden pills in the past 3 days. Without waiting for Bai Si to reply, he said that he didn't care, since even he would smash him and nothing would save him. Bisa gave him a strange look and asked him a counter-question, asking if he had sent someone to watch him because he might be worried about him. Bisa also noticed that President Chen Wuliang was practicing hard, and the bags under his eyes were getting bigger. Chen Wuliang was of course infuriated by this, and told him to shut up and not talk nonsense. And next, he jumped into the arena and decided to teach the bastard a lesson he would remember for the rest of his life. Bisa was only excited, and suggested that the fight should already be underway rather than sitting around with his pants down. Chen Wuliang decided to quickly deal with this garbage. Therefore, he immediately activated his Dragon Soul Strike technique. Bisa, for his part, didn't panic at all. He activated his secret defense technique and dispelled Chen Wuliang's technique. The academy students were shocked that this trash was able to block the blow with his incredibly dense spiritual energy. But Ji Shuang didn't understand, as there was a huge gap of strength between Bi Soi and Chen Wuliang, and that he was able to match him in strength in just 3 days was unbelievable. The teacher even thought that he had actually used some forbidden pills, or he had learned a secret method of making pills. Chen Wuliang was furious that this guy could become stronger. Bisa told him to shut up and keep trying to attack him with everything he had. Chen Wuliang realized that he couldn't give in to him, and he just plain had to destroy him as soon as possible. Zhang Wuliang summoned his yellow rank purple-winged dragon. Now even if he used his full strength, it wouldn't work. Siron didn't even realize that he would summon his spirit beast so quickly. Its purple dragon began to make a huge blob of chakra dais to shoot out at him. All the students who were standing near the arena started to scatter, as they had an instinct of self-preservation and realized that it was very dangerous. Now Qian Wuliang believed that this bastard would just plain burn to the ground, but Bisa did not stand idly by, and summoned his spiritual beast Tunmol Shenchu. Tunmol Shenchu easily took and absorbed that clot of chakra. Qian Wuliang didn't understand how he was able to stop the devouring flames. He had never seen or heard of such monsters. Next, Tunmol Shenchu spat out what he had collected into them. From such a powerful blow, Qian Wuliang was seriously battered and fell to the ground. Chen Wanli immediately ran up to him and started shouting at Bisu that he was a complete freak for daring to cheat. Chen Wanli realized that the situation was not going according to plan, so he decided to take advantage of the chaos to kill him. And then he called his men and announced to everyone that Bisa had cheated, so it was necessary to execute him immediately. But suddenly, in front of the faces of these Chen Wanli people, BC's friends jumped out, who were willing to defend him no matter what it took. Jian Wanli didn't understand where these idiots came from. But still, since they were so eager to die, he didn't discourage them, and ordered them to be killed as well. Next, he ordered his men to go on the attack. Long immediately took herself first, and began to club him with her legs. Siron didn't spare them and gathered some chakra on his hand. Thus his hand was like a knife, and he chopped his opponents with it. These people were so weak that they didn't even have much in the way of techniques. Feng Weixia in turn used her speed and smashed opponents just like that. Jian Wanli watched all of this and came to the conclusion that his men were complete idiots for losing to such trash. He decided to take matters into his own hands and came up with a plan to burn the hell out of the place with all those idiots. Imiana appeared out of nowhere. She activated her technique, Spiritual Wall of 10,000 Spring Flowers. Jian Wanli didn't understand how this fragile girl was able to single-handedly stop his fire star. Chen Wuliang meanwhile came to his senses and began to immediately yell at Jian Wanli for just standing there like a deer and watching. Therefore, he ordered to immediately attack her, as it was obvious that she wouldn't last long. A second later, Bisa appeared behind Chen Wuliang's own back and advised that he would take better care of himself. After which, he stabbed him in the back with tremendous force that even he started spitting blood. Xian Wuliang decided to remind him of the rules of etiquette, because attacking from the back was too disgusting. But Bisho didn't care, and he simply flew at him with his fist. Qian Wuliang was in no hurry to give up, for he believed that this trash would fall anyway by his hand. And after that, he activated the Solid QE Protective Barrier technique. This is a unique technique of the Wuliang family, Solid Qi. It's known for its strongest defense ability. Therefore, the outcome of the battle could have changed a lot. Bisa did not retreat and still pressed his protective barrier with his fist. Chen Wanli laughed at this fool's persistence as it was all in vain. He was already about to finish him off and was thinking about how to do it more elegantly. How suddenly Bisa had broken through that barrier after all. He hit him right in the chest, and it hurt so much that blood came out of his mouth. No one understood how Bisa was able to harm Jiang Wuliang, for he used his particularly rare technique of Solid Qi. Bisa was very pleased with himself. There weren't many techniques that could resist this Solid Qi, but he had done this once before, so he had a couple techniques from the divine world against it. Fortunately, he had prepared for it beforehand. If Imiana hadn't spoken up, it might have even caught him off guard. Ji Shuang immediately realized that this was the same technique that had been created by Baoyun Sangxian in the divine world. Therefore, he simply couldn't know about it from some books. This made him very curious, and he began to suspect Bisu of something wrong. Still, he had thoughts that Bisa was the one he had been looking for many, many years. Meanwhile, Bisa approached Chen Wuliang and advised him that it was better to give up, as this punch had seriously damaged his internal organs. Zheng Wuliang simply couldn't believe that the president of the Spirit Eater Academy's high society could lose to such a brat. So with his last strength, he decided to attack him. Bisa dodged his attack, but he noticed an interesting thing. This asshole was using a dark spell. Bisa decided to counterattack and quickly appeared in front of him to hit him. In the end, Qian Wuliang fell to the ground, and it was officially declared that Bisa won this battle. The dean stood up and ordered his men to take Qian Wuliang with him, as he personally wanted to ask him a few questions. The dean also noticed that Qian Wuliang had used a spell with dark energy. He simply couldn't study it so easily in the academy. Meanwhile, all his friends ran up to him and started congratulating him for such an extravaganza victory. Bisa even got a little embarrassed and thanked them as well. Suddenly there were whispers in the crowd that the girl in yellow was the intruder. Chen Wuliang heard this and just started laughing hysterically. He was very happy that his accomplice, who had sneaked into the forbidden territory of the academy, had finally been discovered. Feng Weixia was taken aback by this information, and she was a bit confused. All the people nearby started yelling and forcing to grab them all for questioning. Suddenly everyone heard a cry out of nowhere. "You've got it all wrong." And then there was a guy who said he witnessed the whole situation, and he could exonerate them. The dean asked his men who the student was. One of them approached the old man and whispered in his ear. The dean immediately realized who was standing in front of him. He hadn't expected him to show up now and not later. It seems he has no intention of hiding his identity further since he's made such a dramatic public appearance. Jin Wanli was very displeased, so he asked the brat who he was and told him to go to hell if he didn't want to die. Jin Wanli ignored him. This kid even knew what Bisu's name was, so he went up to him and told him that he was making him admire him while slowly clapping his hands. Even managed to get the support of his family, got into the Spirit Eater Academy, and was able to publicly defeat Chen Wuliang himself. Imiana looked at Bisu and asked if he knew him. But of course Bisa didn't know who he was, so he asked him his name. The students were surprised that this kid responded so well, and he didn't even know his name. The kid laughed and said it was okay because he had never met face to face before. In other words, he wasn't interested in him before. He then introduced himself as Hong Duo Duo. He added that Bisa's mother was his elder aunt, so they were cousins, and he can prove that there are no family ties between Bisi and Ji Shuang. All the more, he has a clear idea of the family ties in Bisoi's family. Qin Wuliang was furious where this savage had popped out from and who he thought he was. Hong Duo Duo was angered by the word savage, because even his father would not dare to talk to him like that, unless he was looking for death. This infuriated Qian Wuliang even more, and reminded everyone of one thing. His father was the richest man in the biggest country in the continent, even in the Shengtian Empire itself. Hong Duoduo laughed as he realized that trash didn't know who he really was. He decided to let everyone in on the secret, and took out a token that confirmed that he was the crown prince of the Shengtian Empire. Baishi's eyes glistened as he had just found out that his brother was actually a prince. For Imiana, it was more unbelievable that this Oblutos didn't even know about it. Hong Duo changed the subject to the girl in yellow and revealed his cards to everyone. Feng Weixia was actually his servant, sent to help Bizier, so it was all a simple misunderstanding. Feng Weixia stood in a stupor and did not understand what this man was saying, since it was the first time she had seen him, but she remained silent. Qian Wuliang wanted to kill him for lying to everyone around him, but Jian Wanli himself started to hold him back. Still, he had escaped from Qiaozhen Wanli's hands and was already flying at Hong Duo with his fist. The one in turn froze as he became scared for a few seconds. Bisa in turn began to worry about his brother, for this was dangerous and he might get hurt. But Qian Wuliang didn't have time to reach him and froze in mid-air as he was bound by the ropes. It was the dean himself who announced that Hong Duo was indeed the prince of the Shengtian Empire, so everything he said was trustworthy. And Qin Wuliang, in turn, is found guilty of tampering with evidence, as well as using dark spells. Therefore, he is sentenced to imprisonment in the dungeon. Bisa was even more shocked as he only then realized that old man from the Garden of Useful Plants was the very real dean of the Spirit Beast Eater Academy. Jian Wanli was upset and depressed as his president was taken to rot in a dungeon in front of everyone. Zhuan, along with Baoxian, stood on the roof and watched as this trash couldn't even overpower Bisu, and now they would have to perform this backstabbing by themselves. Baoxian decided to cheer up the Lord and looked at the situation from a completely different perspective. Everyone was here now, and they could take advantage of it. In any case, Chen Wuliang knows too much and it was necessary to get rid of him. Therefore, Xuan ordered Baoxian to find and kill him as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Hong Duo decided to take his brother out to eat, and even agreed to treat everyone. BS was only too happy to eat for free. Imiana wasn't even surprised that someone had helped him so much with his issues, and he was beginning to use his kindness for his own ends. On the way to the restaurant, Bisu was called by a teacher. Bisa thought that Ji Shuang was also hungry, so he suggested that he go out to eat with them. Ji Shuang didn't care about the food. He wanted to ask him a question that was very important to him, and asked him to answer honestly. Ji Shuang asked him, "Tai is from the world of gods, right?" Bisa was surprised that he was revealed so quickly, and even froze a little, but he still didn't give much of an appearance, and decided to play dumb until the end. After the conversation, they all went to a pizza place. They all ordered a lot of pizza, and did not deny themselves anything. Imiana sat next to BC and asked him what he was talking to the master about. for Ji Shuang was staring at him intently all the time at the table, even now while eating pizza. In that very conversation, Bisa fell silly and said that he had never heard of the world of gods. Ji Shuang then stated that his technique was able to resist solid qi. It was not something that mortal techniques were capable of. He was trying to get to the bottom of it. Except Bisa was not a slip of the tongue, and asked a counter-question. "Master is so confident, could it be that you come from the world of the gods?" They met gazes, and both their hearts beat quickened. The two decided to change the topic of conversation, and teacher Ji Shuang suggested eating first, and Bisa in turn supported him and was happy to go out to eat. Ji Shuang realized that this was too risky, and he must not reveal himself. Titan Luo and the other three are looking for the artifacts left behind by the 6 gods in the mortal world. They will definitely send people to the lower worlds if Bisa is their accomplice. Bisa in turn speculated that his teacher Ji Shuang might also be from the world of gods. But it could also be dangerous to give himself away, since he might also be an accomplice of the assassin who had killed him. Therefore, neither of them wanted to reveal themselves, but rather to find out about each other in secret. All thoughts were dispelled by Duoduo's cousin, who put his hand on Bisai's shoulder. Duoduo asked his brother how he was able to go from ordinary trash to a once-in-100-years genius in just 6 months. Long jumped into the conversation and also asked him where he had learned how to make pills. For in just 3 days, he was able to narrow the gap between Qin Wuliang. Bisa didn't know what to answer since he didn't want to give himself away, but he was also stumped. Everyone looked at him with glittering eyes to learn his secrets. Only Ji Shuang didn't care, as there was nothing to wonder if his guess was correct. Bisa thought of nothing better than to just stand up and yell, "Look, there's the dean!" When they looked the other way, instead of the dean, they saw the regular worker of this pizza place who had brought pizza for them. When they turned their heads back around, BC was simply gone. He jumped out the window and took a slice of pizza with him. It was all a hassle for him since he couldn't tell them everything and they would definitely suspect him of something. Besides, he had to finish the rest of the case quickly. Without wasting a moment, he went to the dungeon. Tongmol Shengchu cautiously crept through the bars to the inside of Jiang Wuliang's cell. He was surprised to see this monster in his cell again. Tunmol Shenshu spat out a fireball that created a portal. And out of that portal came BS himself. Upon seeing him, Jiang Wuliang began to get angry and yell at the bastard. After all, it was his fault that he was in this damn dungeon. Bisa calmed him down and explained that he only wanted to know where he learned about the dark spells. Jiang Wuliang just started laughing the year he realized that this jerk had infiltrated the secret prison guarded by the guardians of Yueling, just to ask about it. But, even so, Jiang Wuliang replied that he didn't know about any dark spells. Bisa suggested that it was probably all because of the Delicatessen Club. Zhang Wanli had personally met a member of this organization, proving a connection with him. And those disciples who went missing were probably also the hands of the Delicatessen Club. Jiang Wuliang couldn't believe his words. He had only been at the academy for a few days, and he already knew about everything. It was almost unreal for an ordinary student to know about the dark deeds of the Delicacy Club. Bisa decided not to play good cop, and started threatening him with his Tongmol Shengchu. He threatened that he would rot in this prison with all his secrets. Jiang Wuliang realized that he had no choice and told everything he knew. These dark spells were indeed given to them by the Delicacy Club. But in return, they had to help them find the princess hiding within the walls of the academy. He swore that was all he knew. Bisa asked why they were looking for this princess. All he knew was that they were doing the bidding of the man who taught them dark spells. He hadn't seen him before, but he had heard Mr. Xian call him Divine Messenger. Just as suddenly, some dark silhouette appeared behind Jiang Wuliang's back, which fired its technique and killed Jiang Wuliang. Bisa miraculously managed to dodge along with his Tunmol Shenshu. When he looked where the shot came from, there was no one there. He realized that this man had escaped through the bars, and without wasting a second, he simply broke the wall there. And then I saw this man running off into the woods. Bisa decided to chase him down and deal with him. In reality, it was Bao Xian himself hiding under the mask of an assassin. After a few minutes of chasing, Bisa still caught up with him, though it wasn't too easy. Bisa, before a long conversation, advised him to surrender voluntarily at once. For however familiar he was with the local roads, he was slow to run. Bao Xian started laughing at him. Although he was really good, however, if he wanted to catch him, he would still have to sweat a bit. To Bi Xie, it was a very similar person, as if they had already met somewhere before. Bao Xian decided not to run away and finally deal with Bisoi. Therefore, he used his binding du Shukrut technique. At the same time, he told him the truth that the real target was him, not to kill Chen Wuliang. A soul-binding circle had been drawn in advance at the place where Bisa was standing. He had never fallen into a trap so stupidly before. And further, Bao Xian ordered his guys to deal with Bisoi since he wouldn't be able to use his spiritual energy in this circle. Bisa swept up that the latter had already sent even assassins with formation amulets. It was like the latter strongly wanted him dead. That said, the circle had no effect on these guys, so Bisa decided to shave off the circle faster. Suddenly, Bisa felt something wrong under his clothes. The artifact Queen of the Seven Colors has changed her appearance. When he took out and activated this artifact, there was a huge flash, and after that, the circle dissipated. Bao Xian didn't understand what kind of artifact Bai Si had in his hands that he was even able to dispel his magic circle. Bisa thought it was a great moment for his spirit beast, and summoned the Tungmul Shenchu beast with his token. Tunmul Shenchu began to concentrate a lot of chakra in front of him to fire, after which there was a huge explosion. Tungmul Shenchu defeated everyone except Bao Xian, who simply ran away. This Seven-Flower Queen spiritual artifact has improved on its own, and it has become much more powerful. Most likely this artifact is not from the mortal world. A couple minutes later, Long and her boys came running in. Bisa decided to bring them up to speed, and informed them that Qin Wuliang had been killed in his cell while he was chasing the killer, but he had unfortunately escaped. After that, he began to ask her why there were no guards during this whole situation. Long calmed him down and told him someone had snuck into the Academy's archives and stole many student files. Therefore, all the guardians of Yuiling were sent there to investigate. Because of this, they have few free hands, and simply do not have the strength to control the entire academy. To Biji, it was a surprise, for by all facts, Bao Xian was not involved in this case. Having planned everything step by step, this time he had a truly treacherous enemy. Bao Xian meanwhile had reached the secret room of the high society. Xian, on the other hand, had just interrupted a bunch of books and a scroll, but still found it. Now he knows who this princess is. Meanwhile, in the Spirit Eaters Academy, Tianshu Tower, there were cries heard all morning about valuable data from an important place, and it was a great shame for the academy. Chen Kaiyu was very angry at Vice Dean Bai, as he was the one in charge of the archives, so should suffer his punishment. Bai Yunbing, the Vice Dean of Spirit Eater Academy and also the Dean of Lanqiong Academy, began to claim that it was not just 2 thieves who had allegedly attacked yesterday, but a whole group of thieves. 14 guards were injured, so he and his guards did what they could. The Vice Dean of the Spirit Eater Academy, as well as the Dean of Jingyu Academy, Lei Qing, decided to calm them down, and reminded them, right now, the most important thing was to identify their target. They must immediately take some action. Sometime after the beginning of these gatherings, Long and her guards arrived there. The dean stood up and ordered the gates to the academy to close and prepare for battle. Next, he began to command the men. Separate Qinglong, Baihu, and Xuanwu would be in charge of the defense outside the academy, while Suzaku would patrol the surroundings inside the academy. Long, on the other hand, he forbade him from even going to the front lines. Long Xiao was upset by the order, but still obeyed the dean. Bisa meanwhile lay on the bed and pondered over the artifact. The Queen of the Seven Colors reminded him more and more of Long Dinglin. They had come to the only conclusion that they needed to pay more attention to him. Suddenly someone started knocking on his room and demanding that he come out to practice. Except that Bisa wasn't exactly eager to go out and train. Imiana began to yell at him, for if he had prodded Qin Wuliang, that was no reason to sleep all day. In response, Bisa did leave the room and asked her personally if she didn't want to rest after all of this, and why she was so eager to train in the first place. Ji Shuang jumped into the conversation and reminded them that he was their teacher, and he would like to teach them one technique. Imiana didn't understand why her master wanted to teach this lazy man so badly, after which, Ji Shuang ordered them to watch carefully, for they would have to repeat the technique later on. He used the illusion of freezing the earth right on Bai Si. Even though it's an illusion, the body still feels cold. This way he can freeze a person to death, and the cause of death will be hard to determine. Bisa immediately realized that this was Lingan Yusheng's technique. But why and how he knew about this technique from Ji Shuang, he couldn't give an answer. In fact, Ji Shuang had been thinking about this plan all night and decided to take a risk. If he could break this ice, he would prove that he was one of the 7 gods. Bisa realized, only with the help of his unique, soul-slashing art, would he be able to get out of his technique. But after that, Ji Shuang would definitely realize who he really was. Therefore, he began to think of another way to solve this situation. Suddenly, everyone there heard a crackling sound right from underground. Ji Shuang realized immediately that it was the enemies hiding, just like rats. He stopped using the illusion technique to check where they were sitting. Bisa was overjoyed, for he was almost caught. After which, a bunch of enemies popped out of the ground. Bisa immediately realized that this was a delicatessen club, except why they had come straight to the academy. He hadn't guessed yet. Longxia wasn't far away, and ordered Suzaku to go on the attack and deal with the people from the delicatessen club. During the fight, the guy from the deli club yelled, "We found her! Shoot her!" BS heard that and didn't realize who he was even talking about. Looking around, he began to guess that they were the ones who meant Longxia. From far away, everyone could see the battle in that place. And one of the guys from the delicatessen club made a signal, a group of earth dragons. Xuan and Baoxian saw this, so they moved on to the next stage of their plan. Xuan ordered his army to attack the entire Spirit Eaters Academy. Outside the academy, a bunch of explosions were heard and seen. All the students were up against an army of delicacies. Spiritual beast battles could be seen everywhere. The students had the main order. It was to prevent the enemies from approaching the Spirit Eaters Academy and kill all the offenders. They were so angry and motivated that they even created ice out of thin air to kill more enemies. In the end, there were even 8 spirit generals gathered, with Ji Shuang himself being a member. Bisa, meanwhile, had a very strange feeling, as if they were weaving a conspiracy. Imiyana heard this, and calmed him down, saying whatever the plot was, they would regret attacking the Spirit Eaters Academy. Bisa was already running into the battle to help the academy when he suddenly heard in his head, "Bisa, you don't have to participate in the battle. Find Longxia." The dean contacted Bisoi on the mental level and informed him that the main objective of the Delicacy Club was to capture Longxia. Therefore, he ordered to go and personally protect her. Only then did he begin to realize which Princess Jiang Wuliang was talking about back then. Therefore, Bisa turned around 180 degrees and rushed to Longxia's aid. Meanwhile, Longxia herself had captured one guy as a prisoner and decided to interrogate him. She was very curious to know why they had infiltrated the Spirit Eater Academy. This guy decided to ask her something, for according to intelligence, Suzaku should have 80 men, but there were only a few here, so he wondered if the others had gone to fight. Longxi advised him not to worry, because to elicit information from him, she alone was enough. This guy laughed, and after which, a group of people jumped onto Longxia. They didn't even get to torque Longxia before there was a massive explosion. Next, Xuan himself appeared with his huge army. Long was just shocked at the number of people. Bisa, meanwhile, was just approaching Long and saw the huge explosion. He realized that he was probably too late, but he did not give up and ran as fast as he could. To defeat Qin Wuliang, he used the 6-pointed pill. This was already quite a heavy load. He didn't even know if his body could handle another pill. He decided to trust his luck and do his best, so he did eat that pill after all. Longxia had already been sedated at that time, and she was unconscious. Xuan ordered Baoxian to deliver Longxia to them at the Delicatessen Club and inform the brothers in the battle to retreat. Suddenly, a huge fireball flew right next to them. It was, of course, the handiwork of BS. He was very angry and motivated to kill everyone there. This time, Zhuan summoned the elites of the Delicacy Club for him to feel their might since he guessed that they would once again meet face to face. Bisa didn't play around with them and activated the Devouring Golden Dragon technique. He instantly annihilated a group of these elite delicacies. When Xuan saw this, he was simply terrified and scared. Biaoxian meanwhile simply dared him to just leave him and run away with Longxia to the Delicatessen Club. Bisa had already flown at Xuan to deal with him, but the latter began to calm him down and promised to bring Longxia back. Bisa didn't bother to stop and flew into him without sparing his strength. Eventually, they tied him up and took him to the interrogation room. Xuan started clucking and demanding to be untied, since they didn't even have any evidence to tie him up. Especially, even if they had some evidence, the Delicatessen Club would defeat the Soul Eater Academy. After some time of questioning, and this room came in Bisa, who from the doorstep asked the teacher if he wanted to talk trash. The interrogation expert said that he had already started talking, but it was not exactly the information they wanted to hear. Unfortunately, they can't harm him because he voluntarily surrendered. That makes it very difficult. Zhuan himself entered the conversation and started laughing hysterically, saying that no one would have the courage to raise a hand against a surrendered person, and if they did, the reputation of the academy would be ruined. Bisa began to slowly escort the interrogation experts out the door, and added that the dean had asked him personally to take care of it. In the meantime, they could eat in peace. Although they were reluctant, they still agreed to eat, but they understood the methods Bisa would use. Huan became very nervous and shouted for the two of them to stop and not go anywhere. Basa, on the contrary, wished them a pleasant appetite and asked them to take their time eating, after which he slammed the doors of the room shut. Xuan shouted and reminded him that he was forbidden to torture him because it was an ethical violation. He asked him to bring the two men back to continue the interrogation. Bisa started laughing out loud at this guy's naivety, as he had recently wanted to play hardball with him, and now he was asking for mercy. Still, Biso didn't care about the interrogation prima facie, and he actually got to work on extracting information. The one in turn almost went to the bathroom there on the spot. The interrogation experts, meanwhile, were sitting outside this room and heard horrible and loud screams. They reflected on the fact that young people are better than old people nowadays. They even wanted to invite Bisu to their class. After a while, Xuan did speak after all. He was taken to the main hall and gathered a bunch of important people. After that, Xuan said that they had long had the empire as a bone in their throat, so they wanted to change the emperor. And half a year ago, a divine messenger had informed them that the princess was studying at the Spirit Eater Academy. So if they could catch her, they could pull off a real coup. The dean began to wonder who the divine messenger was. In a nutshell, the divine messenger is a messenger who nailed down from heaven and is also the teacher of their masters. He promised that if they obeyed him, victory over the empire would be guaranteed. The dean has already heard about this divine messenger. Rumor has it that his power is very great. 4 months ago, he single-handedly destroyed the Eagle City. Xuan saw that they were afraid of him and asked to be let go since he had some connections with them. He wanted to offer them a mutual benefit. Bisu was fed up with his chatter and just slapped him to shut him up. Then he reminded him that they should hurry up and save Longxia. The fate of the empire itself depended on it. Chen Kaiyu didn't understand how this newcomer in the academy dared to tell them what to do. To save Longxia from the hands of the delicatessen, one would have to sacrifice a lot. Bai Yunbing was also against it, for the Delicacy Club was the largest organization with masters all over the world. They were just an academy, and they shouldn't act so rashly. Lei Qing came into the conversation and reminded about the divine messenger, and was also against it. All the vice deans were against it, but Imiana had faith in Bisu. She didn't want him to give up so easily. Bisa wasn't really going to give up. He just decided to take the blame and reminded everyone that Longxia was caught because of his mistake. Since they were all afraid to confront them, he decided to go alone to fight them. Chen Kaiyu didn't understand him, even thought that this guy was crazy since he wanted to go alone. Seran contradicted them all and said that Bisa would not go alone, as he would also go with him. So to speak, he would support his friend in times of need. Seran was now considered crazy too, just like Bisu. After which, Feng Weixia, Imiana, and Duoduo also decided to support their brother, and decided to go with him together. After looking at all this, Master Xuanji decided not to let him go alone again. So as a master, he had to go with them and watch them too. It was also a great trip to learn more about Bai Si's past. The dean was reluctant, but he allowed them to do so. He asked everyone except Bisi to leave so that he could talk to him one-on-one. The dean tried to explain to Bisa that it wasn't his fault, and there was no need to take any unnecessary risks. Bisa calmed him down. After all, he's doing this all of his own free will. Longxia is his friend, and he can't just sit idly by in the academy. The dean resigned himself to the fact that he couldn't change his mind, so he told him more about Longxia. She was born with a strong fire energy that ordinary people can't tolerate. The emperor was very upset about it. He sent her here to train on this energy, but even here she was looked upon with fear. The emperor loves his daughter very much. If he finds out about this incident, the consequences could be very, very sad. Especially for the academy that took Longxia under its responsibility. Just as suddenly, a subject ran into the room and started yelling that they had a huge problem. A huge army of the empire was standing outside the academy. The general of this army said that it had become known to them that the princess of the empire had disappeared because of their fault. Therefore, the general ordered to report what had happened and extradite the culprit. Otherwise, the army of the empire would attack the academy. There were a great many of them, and they were all ready to attack any second the general ordered them to. The dean along with Bisa went to the walls of the academy and asked what the situation was like. Chen Kaiyu let them know that there were tens of thousands of warriors under the walls of the academy. They had even arranged for a small arrow fire. If he had stayed there for a few more minutes, he would have become like a hedgehog. Chen Kaiyu suggested not to risk provoking the empire, but instead hand over Bisu to them as the culprit for kidnapping Princess Long. Imiyana immediately started shouting at him that he was a coward and blamed him for not being able to hold back the defense, while shifting all the blame to Bisu. She reminded him of Xuan, who was in the punishment cell, and offered to turn him in. The dean ordered them to stop arguing as they were still sick of this childish chatter. He decided to personally go and deal with it. Bisa stopped him, saying that he was just an ordinary general. Where is it that the dean personally reports to such people? So he wanted to go out and talk to him himself. The dean trusted him, so he didn't stop him, and allowed him to go outside to talk to the general. This army immediately saw some little guy and hushed up to listen to him. Bisa said loudly and confidently, "The Spirit Eater Academy is the #1 academy in the entire world. Therefore, they don't even dare to surround it and attack the innocent students." The general had noticed his very powerful will, even thought he was one of the masters, but he looked too young for it. That's why he dismissed it as nonsense. One of the warriors told the general that it was probably the same Bisa. They had rumors that he was the cause of the whole thing. Bisa stopped them by saying it was all the fault of the Delicatessen Club organization. They're the ones who captured the princess. At the same time, the academy managed to take one of them hostage, so finding Long Xia was already a real challenge. The general didn't care at all about what he said. He was sure that this Bisa was responsible for the kidnapping and dared to prove something back to them. So he could think of nothing better than to teach the bastard a lesson. Whereupon the general gave the order to shoot to kill. Chen Kaiyu immediately ordered the students to close the gate when he saw a bunch of arrows flying at them, not caring that Bisa was still outside. Bisa decided to just scare them off to begin with, so he used a trick he had used for entertainment at the banquet in the realm of the gods. This technique looks effective, and if used correctly, you can scare someone pretty good. A huge purple hurricane was created in the air, and began to lift all the arrows and things into the air. Shuangji wasn't even surprised, since no one else but him used such a grandiose technique. Chen Kaiyu, on the other hand, almost shit his pants when he saw BC's technique. He had never seen anything like this in his life. The general was also as surprised as the others, and didn't even know what to do next. The general was suddenly behind him with an arrow, which he put straight to his neck. Bisa ordered him to get out of his sight if he wanted to live. He also asked him to report to the emperor that he would personally bring Long Xia to him in 10 days. And if they lay a finger on the academy during that time, their heads would fall off their shoulders. The general was stumped, so he accepted his terms and ordered his men to leave. They had all fled so quickly, only the sawtooth was left. Bisa didn't even know how easy it was to scare these useless, cowardly people. Serong asked BC how he had managed to stop an entire empire's army single-handedly. He told him that he simply promised to bring Long Xia personally to the emperor within 10 days. Time was running out, so we had to move out now to make it. While on the road, Imiyana offered to come up with a name for their new team. There's been some debate within the team. What was the best name for their team? Teacher Shuangji ordered them to stop arguing, and suggested that the team leader should come up with a name. Bisa thought about it and came to a conclusion. As long as they all strive for strength, then the team will be called Path to Strength. Everyone was in agreement on his decisions, as the title was really not bad, after which they set off on their long-awaited journey. When they came to this delicatessen club, they saw only one man and decided to question him. Apart from him, there was no one in this headquarters, which was very suspicious. This man had nothing to hide, and he told me that they left last night, and he was just a handyman at their club, and he didn't know anything else. Feng Wixia meanwhile searched all over the place, and there really wasn't anyone there. Even though Bisa had already guessed, he still asked the laborer who ordered them to leave. The handyman said it was Bao Xian himself. He killed the previous leader and became the new head of the Delicatessen Club. The divine envoy was on Bao Xian's side, so he had no problem becoming the head. This only made the situation more complicated. Baizi needed to catch up with them before they blackmail the Empire. The question was where to find them now, since they didn't have a single clue, except Dimiana was proving otherwise. In fact, they had a lead. Her family has a large intelligence network. That's how they'll find them. Then they went to the house of Izianju. He was very happy to see Bisu again in his own home. He immediately started hugging him with all his might, making him turn a little blue. As they hugged, Izianju asked him if he was sure he would refuse to marry Imiyana and advised him to think again. Since he had seen that Bisa had done very well at the Spirit Eater Academy, he wanted a son-in-law like her very badly. Imiyana interrupted their embrace and asked her to hurry up and find out something about this delicacy club already. Duo and Seran noticed that there was something between Bisoy and Imiyana. Imiana blushed when she heard about it. Duo decided to put oil on the fire and told everyone that they were engaged. From this information, many people were shocked. He also said that even he, the prince, had been refused by Imiana, and with him almost immediately agreed to marriage, which was very offensive to him. Imiana apologized to BC for her father since her dad is always so active when it comes to her marriage. Bisa told her not to worry about it. He understood and saw that it was just a father's concern for his daughter. Especially since she was against marriage, he didn't take his words seriously. Imiana was even a little upset when she heard that he didn't take her seriously. She had expected him to take her as his wife, at least at some point. Suddenly, some more guests came to Isianju's house. It was Duru himself, the son of the Prime Minister of the Bizun Empire, who had arrived. Imiana started yelling at them as they broke into other people's homes and injured people like cheeky people. Duru echidnously began to smile when he saw that Imian's sister was at home. This time, he didn't just come to look at her. He had come to take her as his bride. Duo was funny. Some toad wants a taste of swan meat. This made Duru very angry, so he ordered his guard to rip him off, his rotten tongue. When that guard was attacking Duo, Bisa felt some very strange feeling. At this time, Yixiangyu himself came out, who was also not very happy to see this Duru. He reminded him that he had previously made it clear that Imian already had a husband. Therefore, he asked him to go back to his place and forget the way here gladly and forever. Duru didn't want to leave, so he took out an imperial order from his pocket. It clearly stated his marriage to the Isianju family. Imiana didn't understand what the joke was about the imperial edicts. Bisa stopped her and turned to Duru. He asked him why bother the emperor when he could just get rid of the groom and no one would say anything. Duru thought about it for a while and realized that it really wasn't a bad idea. So he asked Imiana who her fiancé was so that he could finish him off quickly and take her as his bride. Bisa took a confident step forward and introduced himself as Imiana's fiancé. Duru only laughed with his statement, so disbelieving that she had chosen a trash like him. Then Bisa gave him a very simple solution to this problem, and that was to ask her herself. Imiana became very nervous and blushed at this kind of pressure from her side. But she still confirmed that he was her fiancé. Duru was very upset and almost cried. But he quickly came to his senses and ordered his boys to bring him the groom. Bisa didn't mind this skirmish. After all, a warm-up would be just right for him. Therefore, it was lucky that they were here at this moment. Bisa asked his wife to move away from him, otherwise her dress might be stained with blood. He reached out to her with his hand to push her away. He did not see where he put his hands, as he was standing with his back to her, and accidentally put his hand on her breast. Duru started to get really angry with him because of this stupid act. Xuanji's teacher was a little shocked that he was so relaxed that he didn't even notice where he put his hands. Duo, on the other hand, praised him and considered it a small victory. Bisa, in turn, didn't understand why it was so soft. Imiana couldn't stand it, so she gave BZ's face a very good smack. The latter decided not to waste time on it and started fighting. The one started laughing because he had brought the men of the Iron Wolf army with him. They are all masters of the 100, and will make him beg for death. Bisa advised Duru to come up with something better next time. Bisa used the human magic Gorik's promise. He easily scattered all of Duru's men. Serong didn't understand what this technique was, and why he didn't know anything about his technique. Xuangji explained to him that he was indeed a martial arts genius. He was able to comprehend the spirit beast technique. Duru started ordering this trash to get up and fight on, but everyone was in a very bad state of mind, or even passed out. Bisa took advantage of the moment and took one of Duru's men and pinned him against the wall to interrogate him about something. He was shocked that the Delicatessen Club was not standing still. They had already had time to scratch the prime ministers. The latter, in turn, did not understand what he was talking about. Bisa explained that he had provoked them to fight on purpose, and explained that he was the one who used the dark spell. So he asked him directly if Xuan had trained him. This guy didn't answer anything since he didn't know who this Xuan was. Bisa politely apologized since he was now being trained not by Xuan, but by Bao Xian, who had recently become their head. The boy still didn't know what he was talking about and denied everything. This annoyed Bisu, so he asked Feng Weixia to tell him in an hour where Bao Xian was now. Feng Weixia was even willing to do it quite, and in half an hour, with the methods of Zhengyu Palace. Xuangji walked up to Bixi and told him not to be arrogant, as big problems would still catch up with him. Bixi didn't understand what kind of trouble he was talking about. Xuangji pointed his fan towards Yimian and filled in. Something here took advantage of the engagement, for the sake of achieving goals. and it seems like someone doesn't like it. Therefore, he should hurry up and calm her down. Looking at Imiya now, you could see steam coming straight out of her with anger. He no longer had the energy to deal with such problems. He was very depressed and didn't understand how he got into this situation again. So without wasting any time, he went after her. Finding her, he walked over to her and put his hand on her shoulder, even though she was standing with her back and didn't even turn around. But still, Bisa felt a very strong and vicious aura. She turned to him and asked him what he wanted from her. BS quickly stepped away from her and stopped talking to avoid being told by her. She had too terrible a temper and she had too much strength. There's nothing he can do. But Bisu was suddenly stopped by his friends, and all as one began to tell him to go to her and persuade her. BSA was leaning and didn't even want to go near her. So Duo and Saron decided to take matters into their own hands. They took Bisa by the shoulders and started pushing him towards Imiyana. Bisa was very reluctant as she almost ripped his arm off. Ji Shuang decided to support his disciple and advised him to be more positive. Duo leaned over to him and decided to give his cousin another auxiliary artifact. He put a shell in the form of an earring on his ear. This should teach him how to persuade his wife. Bisa didn't understand Duo as this high-tech artifact violated the logic of this world. After that, they simply pushed Bisu. Duo took out a shell video walkie-talkie and ordered BZ to repeat whatever he said. Bisa approached her very slowly and started to apologize right away, but the woman interrupted him and sent him away. That said, she really wanted to watch him apologize. Bisa started talking nicely about how he didn't want to use their engagement for bad purposes. But it was just necessary in a situation like this. So he was very sorry for the trouble he had caused, and he was willing to be responsible for it, for the rest of his life. Bisa noticed her calm down a bit and even blushed. He was shocked that this nonsense was actually working. Imiyana seemed to melt and even turn to him. It all seemed like a declaration of love on her part, and it made her very uncomfortable. She began to slowly approach him, and Bisa became very confused. The support group was very happy for him and started celebrating. They told him to come even closer to her and give her a hug. Imiyana, through the tears in her eyes, asked him, "Is everything you said true?" Unexpectedly, Bisa said in a voice, "Shut up! You're bossing me around." Imiyana was shocked and didn't understand what was happening. It turns out that the artifact Duo gave him had slid off and Bisa decided to fix it. But he accidentally yanked it and it fell from his ear. The cheerleaders realized that things were heating up and someone was about to get hit very hard. Bisa became very nervous and began to assert in an unsure voice everything he had said earlier was true. Imiyana was incredibly angry and was already stretching her arms to teach him a lesson. A few minutes later, a battered BS was sitting on a stool getting his wounds treated. Bisa was angry at the guys for their crazy plan. Duo calmed him down by saying that she had taken her anger out on him, so she had already calmed down. He could only hope so. Imiyana went to her room to bed. She fell asleep and kept thinking as he said, "I am ready to be responsible for you for the rest of my life." Those words warmed her very much. Meanwhile, Feng Wuxia found out that their organization was working hard to eradicate all the ministers of the empire. When they get their way, they will use Long Xia to blackmail the emperor. Duo guessed the ones who came probably knew where Baoxian was now, so he wondered if he was lying, and if she wanted to betray all of them. Feng Wuxia came to the conclusion that Duo most likely wanted to interrogate them again. Except she was afraid that if he did so, she wouldn't be able to eat for at least a week. That person immediately took back his words and quietly remained silent. Bisa, meanwhile, was wondering how he could still find out Baoxian's location, because then it would make things very easy. Imiyana, who knew where Baoxian was, walked into the room and announced it loudly to the whole room. A few minutes ago, her intelligence had found out that Baoxian was in Fengzhou City. Bisa, when he heard about Fengzhou City, he started to recognize something familiar. Imiyana interrupted him and only confirmed that this was his hometown. And Baoxian was there right now. They didn't have tons of time, so they all set off together and joyfully. After a while, they nailed it in Fengzhou. They didn't want to be seen by everyone, so they all wore black cloaks so as not to attract attention. First, they needed to find the patriarch of House Bai and ask him about House Bao's situation. As they walked forward to the main square, they heard someone beating on a gong. It was the sellers who had sold out a few lady of House B at a very low price. The price of such noble ladies was only 100 taels. When Bisa heard about all this, he began to brazenly break through the crowds to the front. Bisa did not understand, for the Bai family is very strong, and simply could not allow their own children to be sold. A man from the crowd heard him and brought him up to speed. The patriarch of the Bai family had died suddenly, and the masters had disappeared one by one, so they were selling them. When he learned about Patriarch B's death, he froze as he simply could not believe and accept this information. It was clear to all the people that the Bao family had a hand in it. They forged the promissory note with B Tao and took the place of the B family. But there was little talk of this kind, because the Bao family had tight control over everything, and they could get a good price for such a thing. Bisa overheard this conversation and was furious. Although he wasn't really Bisa, but he was still in his body, and besides, the patriarch was very kind to him. Therefore, he vowed to settle the score with Bao Xian one day. The seller took out a sword and put it to the girl's neck so that she raised her head and her beautiful face was seen by all. It was already too much, so Bisa couldn't stand it and intervened by punching the bastard. None of his team understood why he decided to attack alone, without even warning the others. The vendors turned to this old man, that is BC, and warned him that now he would simply be torn apart. No one understood why he was addressed as an old man. And then they looked at Bisu and saw that instead of the young one, there was already a Strix standing there. He disguised himself almost instantly, which made everyone was just shocked with him. After which, two guys from the Bao family jumped to attack him with swords. Bisa didn't stand on a pillar and activated the Shadow Wolf technique. He easily scattered those bastards in different directions with his fire technique. The people of this technique were shocked how this old man was able to activate the Shadow Wolf technique, since it was one of the 16 techniques of the Bai family. After which, he approached one of those bastards and ordered him to go to his master and report that one of the ancestors of the Bai family had come to take revenge. The new patriarch of the Bao family, Bao Yin, meanwhile, was having fun with the girls in his room. But two of his subjects came to him and interrupted his fun by announcing the appearance of the ancestor of the Bai family. Bao Ying immediately became a little nervous when he heard this. They also revealed that the one used the unique techniques of the Bai family. This old man was much stronger than the past patriarch of the Bai family, and he asked them to tell him that he would avenge his family by destroying the entire Bao family. This infuriated Bao Yin was ready to fight and ordered to show the way to this bastard. Let him finally end the lineage of the Bai family and kill this old man. Meanwhile, BC's team went to the pizza place. Imiana was amazed at how Bizai had an instant disguise technique. At that, she applied the technique on herself and examined herself in the mirror. He laughed and said that it was just a simple trick that he had invented himself. He also proposed an ingenious plan to pretend to be the ancestors of the Bai family and fight with the Bao family. As soon as they felt threatened, Bao Xian would come out and they would catch him. And then Long Xia will not be far away. So to begin with, Bisa decided to teach everyone how to use this disguise technique on themselves. Ji Shuang at this began to recognize a very familiar face for himself. The face of that old cultivator who had tricked him into 1,000 years of spiritual fruit in the divine world. He was finally able to discover BC's identity after only years. He was incredibly overwhelmed by the emotion of solving this mystery. While they were eating pizza, a bunch of Bao people came to the entrance of the pizzeria, looking for the ancestor of the Bai family. Bisa, lastly, decided to remind everyone not to use their characteristic techniques during the battle, or else they might reveal this ingenious plan. Taking his time, Bisa and his team walked outside to the entrance. He immediately got into character and began to insult and humiliate them. Bao Ying didn't understand why there were so many of them if they were only talking about one ancestor of the Bai family. So everyone wondered if they were ancestors of the Bai family at all. Bao Yin stepped forward and introduced himself as the patriarch of the Bao family. He greeted them politely and asked them to introduce themselves in return. Bisa realized that they had all come prepared. Even though he was polite, there were still a bunch of soldiers behind him. Then he decided to tell everyone the story of how 200 years ago, the Bao family had fled from starvation, and their kind family had helped them. And now they had acted so meanly in return for their rescue. BC really wanted to show this Bao Ying his retribution. The people of this town heard the story for the first time, but everything looked very plausible, and they believed it. Bao Ying came even closer to him and started yelling that he was lying about everything. Since their family had been living here for many years and had not accepted any help from the Bai family. Then Bisa decided to move to action. So he proposed to go with him to the Bai family's slave cemetery and see their 9th ancestor. Although Duoduo was Bizi's cousin, but he didn't even understand what the latter was talking about. Imiana decided to back him up and confirmed that this was verified information from their intelligence. Bao Ying didn't even want to listen to their nonsense any further, so he ordered his guys to attack these freaks. Sarong already wanted to use a technique to quickly deal with it, but Feng Weiqia quickly stopped him and reminded him not to use his techniques so as not to disrupt BC's plans. Seiron didn't understand how to fight then and only dodged their attacks with his katanas. Feng Weiqia heard this and started laughing at him for not being able to fight without his favorite techniques. This, of course, made Sarong angry. Then Seiron decided to use his strength to the max and ripped out a piece of wood to scatter everyone with the log. Bao Ying didn't understand where he got such strength from since he was able to swing the log with ease. Bisa took Bao Yin as his opponent and used the When Serious technique. His claws turned into a very strong and sharp material. Therefore, it began to attack him with incredible speed. He even managed to damage his black iron sword. It was truly amazing. Bisa stopped at one point as he realized that they were insects and not soldiers, so he gave them 3 days to thoroughly prepare for the next battle. Otherwise, the Bao family would be completely annihilated. After some time, a messenger came running into Bao San's palace. He came running to give him the patriarch's letter, and also informed him that Fengzhou City was troubled and the patriarch was asking for help. Since even a few ancestors of the Bai family came to take revenge, Bao Xian only started to laugh. He realized that it was Bai Si's handiwork, so he decided to go and get his ancestors first.